Welcome to Clothes Horse, the podcast that always, and I mean always, read enough books for a free personal pan pizza. And can we talk about what a grift, in a good way, the Book It program was? If any of you know that, basically I think, pretty long running program that Pizza Hut had in partnership with schools, at least here in the United States. I don't know, you Canadians can weigh in on this, but if you read a certain number of books in a certain period of time, you got a free personal pan pizza at Pizza Hut, which of course made you feel like, look at how successful I am. I basically take care of my family by earning this personal pan pizza for myself that they don't have to pay for. But the grift, or at least the genius marketing, will say, is that your whole family had to go along because you're a kid. You can't drive yourself there. And of course, they're going to come in too and eat pizza for dinner. And so suddenly your whole family is there ordering pizza. Man, that is how Pizza Hut raked in the dough, pun intended. Anyway, I'm your host, Amanda, and this is episode 235. I took a few weeks off, one to go to the UN, which was a really interesting experience, an awesome experience, and I'll tell you more about that next week. And I also just needed a little bit of time to just cope with like the tremendous burnout I'm feeling right now. This year has just been like really, really hard. Like I just have a lot of work going on. The world itself is very difficult to live in right now. And I'm kind of tired. I keep up a pretty wild pace and I just need an extra week off to kind of rejuvenate. And I may be taking off some more weeks here and there during the summer because I want to do fun summer things, okay? I don't know what they are, but I'll know them when I see them. This week's episode is also coming a little bit late, speaking of fun summer things, due to the important commemoration of Mr. Dustin Travis White's birthday. I did not feel cool asking him to do some free work for me on his birthday, so you're getting this episode a little bit late this week. But wow, is it worth the wait? Because here we are with an episode I am super excited about. This week, you're going to meet Molly and Jane of Content Queen, which is a two-person Bay Area-based zine publisher. What a tongue twister. And we're going to talk about all kinds of very hot topics, including literally Hot Topic, the store. Why Jane and Molly make physical zines rather than virtual/online content in 2025. This answer is important and it might get you thinking. How the kind of content we consume, especially the content we read, has changed in the social media era. And then we're going to deep dive into two of Content Queen's zines that are explicitly fashion related. One is called Stressful, Awkward, Envied 90s and 2000s brands from those who wore the clothes, worked the registers, and modeled for the catalogs. Y'all are going to love this. You're going to want to go read it ASAP. It's so good. It makes me so happy. It's so nostalgic. So Clothes Horse coded in every way. And I didn't even know Jane and Molly before I laid eyes on this publication. It's incredible. And then also Wendy's World, which is, quote, an immersion into the early 90s downtown New York world of the ultimate cult indie fashion label built by Wendy. So lots of nostalgia in this episode. Lots of talking about books, lots of talking about reading, and just generally a really good time. Along the way, Molly and Jane will also tell us about what it's like to vend at a zine fair in 2025 and why it's different than it used to be. And as if this wasn't all enough, we're going to wrap it up by making our trend predictions. And oh, yeah, I'm just going to tell you now, I might make some of you very angry by saying that It Ends With Us is a bad book, which is not meant to disparage any of you who love it. Taste is very personal, especially with books, and perhaps you don't love The Little Princess as ardently as I do, and you'll hear all about that in this week's episode too. Before we jump into that, well, I have two things I want to tell you. One, recently I watched, I think it's a 2-part documentary on HBO Max about Paul Reubens, aka Pee Wee Herman, and it made me so happy. I really recommend you go watch that if you have access to that. And secondly, after watching that, I found a compilation, if you don't like abbreviations here, a compilation of all of Pee Wee Herman's early appearances on Late Night with David Letterman, like in the very early 80s. And I don't know, it's like 2.5 hours long. And it was so fun to watch. Also, we split it over 2 nights and also just filled me with so much joy. So if you're looking for something different to do this week or something that's going to make you feel happy, go check those out. But then I have something else to tell you beyond that, which is I wanted to announce a little event that I'm doing in Philadelphia in July with Ruby of Slow Fashion Academy, formerly Spokes and Stitches. In honor of 5 years of Clothes Horse, which I cannot believe, but we're almost there, we are throwing a little birthday thrifting crafternoon on July 20th, which is a Sunday, FYI. We're going to get things started at the Bargain Thrift Center, former guest shout out, where we will look around for t-shirts or other items that we would like to customize or upcycle. And then next we'll go to the Slow Fashion Academy, which is on the same block. It's Ruby's studio, and we're going to spend a few hours making something new out of what we thrifted. I'm bringing a stash of vintage upcycling books from the 60s, 70s, 90s, aughts, hopefully to give you some inspiration. And Ruby is providing additional materials, scissors, tools, and sewing machines. So we'll spend a couple hours snacking and crafting, and then we'll head to Attic Brewing Company, where we'll chat and play nostalgic capitalism games like Mall Madness, Let's Go to the Mall, and more. I've collected quite a stash, and I'll be bringing them all with me. So here's the thing. There are only 15 tickets available, and you can get yours at the link in the show notes. Tickets are $65, and they include the following. You get a $10 voucher to use at Bargain Thrift. You get 1 Clothes Horse iron-on transfer of your choice. Dustin and I will be bringing the heat press, along with all these board games. The cart is going to be so full. We're bringing the heat press so we can iron it on for you right there. There will also be additional Clothes Horse merch for sale. So if you have multiple items that need iron-ons, we're ready for you. Bring stuff. If you want us to iron it on for you there, bring it along. We're there. We're ready. You'll also get 1 drink ticket to use at Attic Brewing, and they have non-alcoholic drinks as well. I don't drink alcohol, but I am excited to have something very refreshing while I'm there. And of course, also at the studio, we're going to have snacks, beverages, and birthday cake. If all of that doesn't sound like the right fit for you, if you're like, don't make me craft, don't make me eat cake, you can also come join us afterwards at Attic Brewing Company. You can stop by to say hi. You can play some nostalgic board games. You can hang out with other clothes horsians. I don't know. We need a name for this community. Anyway, more details coming about when and how to meet up with us. They'll come closer to the event. But once again, that's on July 20th. And I would just recommend that you do not snooze on this, because with only 15 tickets available, they could go really fast. And the link will be in the show notes. So just go do it now. It's going to be so fun. And I am excited to hang out with you all and cut up some stuff from the thrift store and, sew it back together again. Okay. Before we jump into my conversation with Molly and Jane, because it's long, this is a long boy, this episode, but I promise it'll go by so fast. And plus, you haven't listened to an episode in like 2 weeks, so you need a little extra this week, right? I just wanted to talk a little bit about reading and writing. I know, scintillating, right? But actually, yeah, scintillating, thrilling, important. I remember feeling very anxious about learning both of these skills in school. I kind of already knew how to read books thanks to a series of animal books with accompanying records that somehow found their way into my possession in preschool. And I don't know why someone gave a small child records, but what can you do? It's too late now, right? I already learned how to read, and who knows where those records are now, probably a landfill. But I will tell you that I was thrifting a few weeks ago and I actually found the books. Of course, I had to buy them. Nobody else was as excited as me. I think I shrieked, just a low-key shriek. With my mask on, you could probably barely hear it. But I was very excited about these books, and looking at them has made me so happy. But that was my introduction to reading. In school, when we had to start learning reading and writing, the formal instruction of it all felt overwhelming to me. Was I up for the task is how I felt. And to be honest, controversial take here, not the only one you'll hear in this episode, I'm still not a fan of actually writing something with a pen or a pencil. I love drawing, but when it comes to writing things, printing things out, or God forbid, writing cursive, my brain just moves way faster than my hands. And I have pretty okay handwriting now, although I see it going downhill because I use it a lot less. But my handwriting was so bad when I was a kid that my mom would make me sit at home and copy the dictionary for an hour every day to try to improve my handwriting. I don't know if it helped, but man, it made me hate writing even more. Anyway, writing, but reading, wow. Learning how to read unlocked this whole new world for me. And it was escape. It was sneakily educational. It was fun. And over time, it was a source of comfort. And, I always joke that speed reading is my superpower. And people are like, oh my God, did you take a course on it? Do you have any tips? I'm going to tell you, I'm a fast reader because I have had so much practice. Imagine if I had put that amount of time and energy into sports. Maybe I'd be an Olympic athlete. Probably not. But maybe, right? But I have spent so much of my life reading. During the summers as a kid, I would devour 10, 20, 30 books a week in elementary school and middle school. And I'm talking chapter books. Just a casual humble brag here. By the end of fourth grade, it seemed like I had read everything in the town library in both the kids and the young adult section. So my mom gave me permission to start reading grown-up books. And I don't know how it happened. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but the first adult book I ever read was Flowers in the Attic. If you know, you know. Definitely read it like 50 times minimally, just kept starting it over and over again. I mean, there's an awesome dollhouse in it, okay? I am by now fully versed in all the VC Andrews work that's out there. Have any questions, send them my way. But salacious incest books aside, reading opened doors and also kept me feeling safe and okay. Rereading my favorite books, even, alas, Flowers in the Attic, gave me something reliable to hold on to. I am so passionate about books and libraries to this day. And this year, I've been putting more time aside to read because it's been a respite from the exhausting level of anxiety I have been experiencing. And I have tried it all. I tried playing video games and it was like, okay, a little bit. I have very little patience to watch anything like television or movie, unless apparently it is a comp of Pee Wee Herman on late night in the early 80s. Then I'm like fully focused. I also one time watched a full documentary about baby elephants in Japanese, and Dustin said it was the most riveted he'd ever seen me by any video content ever. So I'm a reading person. And like I said, reading has been a good escape from feeling anxious this year. It's one of the many great things about books is that reading is like, it's just so immersive, right? You really are transported somewhere else. But like I said, I've been anxious this year. And speaking of anxiety, I've had this growing sense of dread about the future of books and reading. I've read numerous think pieces that make me afraid that reading and writing are slowly dying in favor of video and screens. A 2024 piece from The Atlantic explained how students at elite colleges are struggling to read entire books for class because they just don't have experience reading entire books. And after reading this, I talked to an English teacher friend of mine who would prefer to remain anonymous for many reasons. And she told me that they no longer read books in her high school curriculum because the kids just don't have the attention span or really like literacy to read a whole book and like think about it and expand upon it. They instead focus on short essays and stories. And that was really disheartening to me because, to be fair, I read some pretty boring books in high school. Like, sorry, not sorry, Great Expectations, not doing it for me, except for how I realized as an adult, I'm such a Miss Havisham. You know, I didn't love it. Moby Dick, overrated. Sorry, that's my hot take. This and more. Maybe I just need a podcast where I just break down every book I've ever read. Anyway, I still think it's important to read books. And I read also some books in high school that were like life-changing for me. For example, Sophie's Choice is really how I came to understand the Holocaust in a more like personal way, far more expansive than anything I'd learned in history class in school. So just an example of how I think reading books is so important. Last week, I almost burst into flames of despair. Like I had to run into the other room and tell Dustin I just read the most upsetting thing ever. And he was like, what? I think it wasn't as upsetting to him as it was to me. But I read a piece from The Guardian called "It's So Boring. Gen Z Parents Don't Like Reading to Their Kids and Educators Are Worried." And I'll tell you, I'm worried after reading it. If you would like to get worried, like me, I will share the link in the show notes so you can also spiral about the decline of literacy and how it will look in a few generations. Now, of course, all of this kind of stuff, it can be slightly a bit of what we call a moral panic, where people are, panicking about something that's really not as big of a deal as it seems, or maybe they're panicking based on false information. But I also see the signs of reduced media and cultural literacy around me, even just how people do or do not comprehend social media posts, you know? And I want you to think about it. AI is trying to give us the option of never having to read or write again. Like, just ask the internet a question and it will somewhat correctly, fingers crossed, answer it for you. I've also seen weird posts going around the internet in the last week where apparently the current hot topic on Book Talk, which is I'm going to sound like a grandma right now, the section of TikTok about books, or people making content about books, okay? Now, I will tell you, Book Talk has been accused in the past of driving people to overconsume books by like buying books that they never read. And that sucks, but I like to believe that eventually they're going to read them. By the way, I have a rule in my house that a book cannot go onto the bookshelf until it has been fully read, and any books that have not been fully read must sit on this chair in my bedroom. Right now, there are 2 books on there. I'm getting to them, okay? Anyway, this conversation that's going around on Book Talk right now, or at least was last week, it could have changed by now, was that basically if you've read more than 20 to 24 books in a year, which is like one every few weeks, you're over consuming books. And no, they're not talking about just buying books. They're talking about like even if you're checking them out of the library. And that is just, I'm sorry, but that is anti-reading propaganda. So all of this can sound like, come on, silly. It's just TikTok, blah, blah, blah. But think about how literacy or lack thereof is a tool of fascism and control, quite ironically, in some excellent books. For example, in The Handmaid's Tale, women are forbidden to read and write because it keeps them pliable and subservient and, in theory, pregnant and taking care of their men. Okay? In 1984, a book that comes up so often when Trump is our president, language is simplified into something called newspeak, where every idea can be conveyed in a single word. Why? Because then people no longer have language to communicate anything outside of what those in control allow them to think about. And yeah, they're not reading books either. In Fahrenheit 451, tech companies simplified books into something people could read in 5 minutes or less. And then the books became less important until they were finally just burned and no one read anymore. This made everyone easier to control. No chance of them reading a book and suddenly, learning about resistance from it or just having a different idea of how the world could work. And sure, these are dramatic versions of a bookless future, but I can't help but think in an era of trad wives and way too much focus on controlling our bodily autonomy and talking everyone into birthing more babies, well, doesn't weird social media conversation about not reading too many books or just finding the answers on ChatGPT, doesn't that feel just like a little bit sinister? I'm always saying that the little things you do every day are actually radical and impactful in a fast fashion, fast everything world. Reading is one of those things. Yes, reading is a radical act. Writing is a radical act. Telling stories is a radical act. Sometimes someone who doesn't have our best interests at heart might be filling our ears with statements that feel like facts because they come from someone with power or prestige, but really are just being used to confuse us into believing something that benefits them, not us. For example, telling people that they're reading too many books, right? Who does that really serve? We'll come back to that. Sunday morning, Dustin and I were listening to an episode of Hidden Brain about kids playing outside on their own. And one of the guests shared a story of his childhood best friend teaching him how to ride a bike. And I said to Dustin, "Oh, wow, my friend Tanya taught me how to ride a bike in 5th grade." And he was like, "Wow, that's like kind of late. And also, why didn't your mom teach you how to ride a bike?" And then I remembered why I didn't know how to ride a bike. My mom had told me, "You're too uncoordinated to ride a bike. You probably can't learn, and you will definitely hurt yourself if you try." And there were also many other things I was too uncoordinated to do. Take gymnastics class, join really anything remotely athletic in elementary school, wear certain shoes, wear nice clothes, all these things. I really wanted an easy bake oven, and my mom said I was too uncoordinated to use it. I'd probably burn myself, so I couldn't have one of those either. My mom said this to me, and because she was in a position of all-knowing power in my life, I believed her. I accepted that I was too uncoordinated to ride a bike or use an easy bake oven. So I was over at Tanya's house. It was fifth grade. Really, her house was a trailer, and I promise that is part of the story. And her mom suggested that I should bring my bike along with me the next time because the streets of the trailer park where they lived were really good for riding around. They were like newly paved and it was pretty safe. And you could actually ride a great distance without being very far from where you started because there were just so many little streets. And I told her that I didn't have a bike of my own. And she was surprised. So I explained, well, my mom said that I'm too uncoordinated to ride a bike and I'll probably hurt myself. Now, her mother grimaced, and I'm sure she was, now as an adult, I can see this, probably trying to not say something bad about my mom. So instead she said, Tanya, go out there and show her how to ride a bike. And she did. And I learned how to ride a bike that day. Thank you, Tanya and Tanya's mom, for literally changing my life. Yes, I fell a lot. I scuffed up my knee. There were definitely a few moments where I wanted to give up, but Tanya was so patient and I did it. I kept my balance and I pedaled up the street long after she had let go of the seat, almost so fast that I didn't even really know I was doing it until I turned around to come back. Eventually, my little brother got a new bike for his birthday and I was able to use his old one. And I would just ride around in circles for hours during the summer. When I was done doing homework, I would pedal around and around. Basically, my summer was housework, reading, and bicycling. And to this day, riding a bike is right up there with reading at the top of my favorite things to do list. Dustin and I take our bikes on road trips, or we rent them in other countries. I've biked around every city I've lived in, beach towns I've visited, small rural towns in Texas, and even little islands in Japan. I just love riding a bike. Why did my mom tell me I couldn't do it and would never be able to do it? I don't know. Maybe she didn't want to take the time to teach me. She did have my kindergarten teacher teach me how to tie my shoes. It could be that. Maybe she didn't want to spend the money to buy me a bike, which I understand too. If you're buying bikes for 2 kids, that's a lot of money. Maybe she worried that I would no longer be our family's housekeeper and cook if I had the freedom to ride away. I don't know. But to me, reading and biking are almost the same thing, like in my mind. Simple things that make me happy and are good for my mind and body and maybe even the world. I wouldn't want anyone to take those away from me, ever. And when I think about why people might be persuaded to read less and stream and scroll more, I see the motivations as clearly as my mom's reasons for keeping me off a bike. It makes us more malleable and controllable because we aren't being exposed to any new or different ideas. It makes us more vulnerable to misinformation, which then makes us easier to control. And of course, it makes it so much easier to sell us some more shit. That comfort and escape that we get from reading, without it, we might just go shopping instead. If our brains are no longer stimulated by words and stories, we'll look for some enrichment elsewhere. The accumulation of more stuff that we probably don't need. Discouraging us from reading is good for both capitalism and fascism. These things kind of start subtly. Anyone who has read The Handmaid's Tale or any other piece of dystopian literature will tell you that it's just little pieces at a time, and then suddenly, I don't know, there's no more bees and no one knows how to read. And by the way, if you're looking to read other dystopian work, which is quite an undertaking in 2025, I get that, but if you're looking to read other dystopian work by Margaret Atwood, who is the author of The Handmaid's Tale, I actually recommend reading the Mad Adam trilogy, which over a span of 3 books kind of explores how society breaks and what it looks like afterwards. I actually really love them, maybe more than The Handmaid's Tale. I had mono in 2017, and I spent half of that year in bed reading dystopian novels. And you know what? It was weirdly fun. Trump was president then too. I don't know what to say. Sometimes you got to scratch the wound to feel a little bit better. I don't know. Anyway, the next time you encounter any kind of content, social media or otherwise, that seems to discourage you from reading and learning, I want you to take a more critical view of this. Why would someone suggest we read less books? That reading too many books is overconsumption, which, wow, what a way to get people who care about doing good things for the planet. What a way to get them to stop reading books. Like, pretty sneaky, right? Why would someone suggest that we just skip our own reading and research in favor of just asking ChatGPT? That we can just watch the movie and get the same impact, which, by the way, hot take here, I think many of you will agree with me on this, 99% of the time, the book is better than the movie. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Why are so many people campaigning aggressively, using so much money and so much time to ban specific books from schools and libraries? I'm going to tell you, at my last corporate job a few years ago, for Banned Books Month, I did this project where in all of our stores, we sold, I want to say it was like 30 different banned books. And we did little write-ups on cards around them. The window displays were all about them and explaining these books. And we talked about it on social media. And we donated a portion of the sales to projects that would, supply books to kids. And that meant for 6 months straight in preparation for that, I read just about every book that was being banned from public libraries and schools in Texas. And the one thing they all had in common is that they just highlighted people of color or experiences other than the just very straightforward middle-class white cis male experience. There were stories of girls sort of coming of age and the experiences of growing up. There were a lot of stories about discrimination and racism and violence that people are subject to because they're not white. There were a lot of young people coming to terms with their sexuality and coming out or being afraid of coming out. Why would we ever want to hide those stories, right? Why would people ban books? When you think about it, you start to see a bigger picture there, right? Okay, how about this one? Why would the president of the United States or the president of any states anywhere, united or otherwise, why would they want to dismantle the Department of Education? I mean, that's dystopian right there. Or even on a smaller scale, when someone says, which this happens to me a lot, I see this a lot, and they mean this as a snarky thing, which is, this is too long, so I didn't read that. Ask yourself, is it really cool to just not read something? Or is that person also just discouraging themselves and others from reading, possibly because someone else modeled that behavior for them, right? What's the equivalent of my mom telling me I can't learn how to ride a bike, telling others that they probably can't handle reading, right? Because I see that happening too. I literally heard someone say to someone else on a bus one time, "You're too stupid to read that book." What the fuck? Okay. Reading is so important. Education is so important. It opens us up to a better world. It gives us empathy for situations we don't understand, right? It brings us together as humans, which is interesting because reading feels like such a solitary act. But I promise what we learn while we're reading, what we experience while we're reading, it brings us closer to people all around the world who we will never meet IRL. And I think that closeness is scary for those who succeed when we're separated, when we're lonely, when we feel desperate, when we feel like we aren't getting what we're supposed to get out of life. A lot of really bad people and systems thrive when we feel that way. We must protect books and libraries and reading and writing. And I can't even believe I'm saying this, but this is how we share ideas and information. They are the essential building blocks of a better future because they help us see alternate outcomes. They help us envision solutions. They introduce us to people we might never meet IRL. And that's how we learn empathy. We must continue reading, even when it feels hard or we're too busy or too tired. We must continue to make books accessible to everyone. So keep on reading and get everyone else around you to read too. Let's take trips to the library together. Let's form a book club. Let's share our lists of favorite books. Let's stay radical by reading. Okay, well, that's a heavy intro to this conversation, but I promise it fits the rest of this episode, which is fun also, I promise. So let's jump into my conversation with Molly and Jane of Content Queen. All right, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, hello. I'm Jane Justice Leibrock. I live in San Francisco. I am co-editor of Content Queen, which is a content project of myself and another special lady you're about to meet. And I like to powerlift, and I live with 2 cats.
Hi, I'm Molly. I am... Sorry, let me reintroduce myself with my full name since that's what Jane did.
I know,
Hi.
so fancy.
I know. Or you don't have to include my full name. I just have a very confusing name, so I'll say the whole thing.
Okay.
I'm Molly Jane Rosen Mariner. I really went to add on as many names as I could throughout my life. I'm a writer. I live in Oakland with a husband and my basset hound. And I really like reading books. It's a great hobby. And watching movies. Those are my versions of powerlifting.
I like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm kind of an indoor kid, so the books, movies really resonates with me more.
Powerlifting is indoors, so
that's true. I guess. Yeah,
I like books and movies too.
No, she doesn't.
Jane. Okay, just so you all know, Jane is such a jock. Canceled. Yeah. Anyway, well, I'm excited to talk to you today. I basically sent you an email out of the blue, and you somehow responded to me in 15 minutes, which still feels like very special to me. Also, it's how I know I'm speaking to email fans, which we were discussing earlier. And I basically became aware of your work because my friend Kat, who lives in the Bay Area, she actually has this brand called Baby Cats of California. I don't know if you've ever seen her stuff. It's cat themed, as you may have guessed. She said, hey, I'm sending you a present in the mail. And what she sent me was a copy of 2 of your zines. She sent me Wendy's World and Stressed, Awkward, and Envied. And she really had my number because I was very excited to get those in the mail. And after reading them, I was like, yeah, I asked my husband, I was like, is it weird for me to just reach out to strangers and ask them to come and be on the podcast that probably doesn't even seem like it's about zines or anything? And he was like, yeah, you should just do it. The worst thing will happen is they'll pretend they didn't get the email. And I was like, you're right. So
Amanda, we've been waiting for someone to reach out to us for so long. No, seriously.
Well, I was like so excited because since we started talking and playing this episode, you sent me your other parts of your catalog, and like the amount of joy that it has brought our household of 2 humans and 4 cats is like unmatchable. Like we have been just reading these over and over again and loving them. Obviously, this is a very pro-zine, pro-book household. We have a Rhizo in our living room. Like we are like, this is something we're really into. And yeah, I'm just excited to talk to you about what you do today. So I thought we could get started by just talking about, how did Content Queen begin?
Okay, we were talking about this the other day, and Molly actually remembered the original inciting incident better than me. So she should tell that part.
Yes.
Okay.
I was interviewing for a job and where you had to make a deck, which was a term that I didn't know. And Jane, who is much more professional than me, we often describe her as the gallant to my goofus, was kind of giving me advice about like what is like a basic deck trope versus what would be more creative. And ultimately what I landed on was using like an Us magazine framework for the visuals of my deck and like what I would include to introduce myself, like a what's in my bag, 25 things about me. And not only did that get Jane's approval, but it unlocked our collective memory of like the best parts of magazines from the time period that we were so obsessed with magazines is not the features, but it's what you can only describe as like the set it and forget it content, like the features that come in the front of the magazine and the back, the Us Weekly stuff, the Vice do's and don'ts, the 17 embarrassing moments, like the formula stuff. And what if there was a magazine that was made up of only that repeatable content? Nothing that nothing that is features or timely, just only those generic things. And that evolved to Content Queen issue 1, which was our take of like a Bay Area girl boss magazine, which is a very specific type. You know, I think we started this in, 2018, which would have been like the pinnacle of the wing and really like a more naive and shining moment for girl boss culture. And so our first few issues were really a take on that. And from that, we started publishing other things under the Content Queen label too, projects that really started to spiral out in the scale of their ambition and what topics they would take on and how we would design them.
Okay.
Wow, love that.
That I want to go back and savor the moment though, because I remember I have a very vivid memory, not of critiquing your deck, but of the moment when we actually decided to make something. Because up until this now, we were just trying to get Molly get a job.
Which I got it, by the way.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Reader, I got it.
She has an even better job now. And she's a queen. But I remember sitting in my apartment and we were talking about these different parts of magazines that we liked. And oh my gosh, wouldn't it be great if there were a magazine just of them? And then there was a moment where we were like, wait, we can just make it. Let's make it. And that was like, we hadn't been talking about like, oh, what zine should we make together? Right?
No.
Like,
no.
Yeah.
And I should say that I feel like I'm so informed by magazines of the 90s and 2000s that I feel like the inner narrative in my head, for better or for worse, is magazines from that time period. Like I consider myself, I have a huge poster of the Monica Lewinsky issue of Jane magazine here. I was obsessed with Vice, briefly an intern there. Like I was so into like Cosmo Girl 17 before that. And then I was also really into zines at that point too. I made a zine with my high school best friend called Diva Angst. And to this day, now she's like a hotshot graphic designer. And so we were both kind of like mirroring the adults that we would one day be. Like she was making it on her old school Mac, like reached out to bands to interview them. And we also made e-zines, which is a community. This is, if anyone listening here ever made an e-zine, please reach out to me because I would love to talk to someone about it, which is where in an AOL email template, you would just format, just using text, a zine. So a very specific layout thing that I remember doing is just writing the letter I over and over, highlighting it, making the text pink and the outline of the text pink. So that would be like a line and a border. And so I would put out a bunch of AOL zines, but then also I think in Jane magazine, I learned about different zine distros. So I would get catalogs in the mail, put $10 in an envelope and just trust that something would come back to me. And Jane was recalling, you can take it, that you used a credit card and ordered zines online, which is totally beyond what I was doing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. For some reason, one of my first uses of the internet was to order physical zines. I don't know how I knew that I could do that, but I did.
I mean, I love that your inspiration was these sort of like innards of these publications, because as you're talking about it, like thinking of Vice, for example, the only thing that has ever stuck with me from Vice are the do's and don'ts.
Oh, not the A to Z tips on how to like own a firearm or give a blowjob or be the perfect hot woman. I feel like there's some toxic
there was
stuff,
I think
yeah.
I at the peak of Vice-ness was a sales associate at Urban Outfitters, which might come up again later in conversation. And so we sold the Vice, the books, right? And we sold a lot of them. And I think about those books now. I've never seen them thrifting. One day one will cross my path, I'm sure. And I'm like, I know that those magazines are so fucked up. Like
they're
know.
terrible.
Yeah,
they're
Yeah.
so
so
terrible.
fucked
It's
up.
like women must always wear high heels. But
High heels and jeans. Yeah.
They can't wear red toenail polish for some reason because that freaks out the Vice guys. They're extremely toxic. But the do's and don'ts are actually the part of Vice that we have like parodied, right? Have we done our take on any other part of them?
I think that would be like a step too far. And also,
no, I tried to write another Vice style article and it was too disgusting.
Yeah.
And we couldn't publish it. It was like, this is awful.
Yeah. Just like getting that voice is just, it's even too much for doing the do's and don'ts. Like there's one do's and don'ts that we had where we're doing do's and don'ts about like plants. different house plants, and it's like, look at this fucking disgusting like fat plant, you know. And then like, look at this verdant babe.
Like the voice of the do's and don'ts just reminds me of like the scumbag dudes who I knew were like 5 to 10 years older than me at that time, who seemed to be. At that point, I was living in Portland, Oregon, who seemed to be like controlling like the hipster scene, you know, and like they're gross dudes, you know, and that stuff. I don't know, like. When you said about like women have to always wear high heels with jeans and weird stuff like the red nail polish stuff, that no one can discount how much that has impacted an entire generation of people. I know. Because years later, when I was
included,
exactly. When I was working at Girl Boss World headquarters, Nasty Gal, we had all kinds of weird, fucked up rules like that about how we shot apparel, and one of them was the jeans could never be shot with flat shoes ever. And no one could wear red nail polish because it was. I know.
Oh my God!
Wait, what was the reason? What was the reason for the red nail polish? What did they say? Because I forget the Vice reason.
I can't remember. It's not premium or something like that. You know, like it was premium. Like not. Yeah, but there was also. I don't think this came from Vice, but it probably did in one way or another. If we shot sweaters, they could not. They had to be shot with short shorts or no pants at all. We could never do a whole outfit with sweaters. Not sexy enough.
Oh, that's so interesting because I think we'll get into this with like Stress, Awkward, Envied, but I feel like such a formative magazine and catalog reading thing I had, especially someone from upstate New York, was looking at photos in magazines and catalogs of girls wearing sweaters but shorts and just thinking it was so improbable and crazy that there was a climate where you would wear shorts but a sweater, and just finding that like a very mysterious adulthood, like cool girl thing.
Yeah, very mysterious. I mean, I will say that I definitely, in that like 2010 kind of era, was definitely wearing really short denim shorts with tights everywhere. Yeah. But the probability of just wearing those shorts with a sweater, I don't know what that weather is. No. Right? If you're cold,
it's nasty gal weather. It's nasty
gal weather. Yeah, it is nasty. Yeah, and I just think, like, even for myself, like, the magazines, like, the things that stuck with me were all the things that were always in Jane or Sassy that were these recurring columns, like, it happened to me, and, you know, I always loved the quizzes in, like, 17, even though they were... That made no sense.
That's
right?
the easiest and best thing, I think, for us to satire. Well, that and embarrassing moments, like, they're very easy. And, I think Jane and I were discussing that I think ultimately our work is much more influenced by magazines than zines.
Yeah, I can definitely see that in your work. So let's, one question I had, I mean, when you talked about e-zines, I am now obsessed with tracking down images of these because I have like so many questions. I feel like it's probably an aesthetic inspiration goldmine, to be honest. But why did you decide to do something like physical, like actual zine paper? People put it in their hands, they pay money for it, it's a thing they carry around, versus like a blog or like a social media account that would do this kind of thing. Because they're not as like high quality, to be fair, but there are social media accounts that are like, we just show satirical versions of children's book covers, or we make fake toys and take photos of them, or what made you decide to do this like physical object?
Okay, we have a lot of reasons here, but I'll just start with maybe one closest to our heart, which is the audience. Like, we, from the start, have really been in it for the heads. Like, we're looking for super fans and like the kind of people that, as you were so kind to do, will like freak out about the things that we make. So we want like one like nerd's sustained attention on what we wrote, which is like the kind of engagement that you'll get from a physical object. We don't want like the fleeting chuckle from someone who's swiping. So I think that was a major reason, is like we want to get something into someone's hands and then we want their attention.
I think that's fair.
Because our work also prioritizes writing, I think that I'm not an e-reader, and I just think that there is this level of attention to writing and what's actually inside of something rather than like a quick skim, that having something written down. Like, we really want someone to savor all of the words in our writing. Anything that we do visually is like in support of the words and the theme. And I don't think that doing something digital would honor that.
We also really like to collaborate. Particularly Molly is like a collector of amazingly talented people that can like do layout, illustration, things like that, production, and making something physical just expands the number of people that we need to collaborate with, which I think is like something that we want.
Yeah.
I think these are all really valid reasons. I do think there is something, I don't know, I mean, I'm sure you've seen like a million arguments around the internet about, sort of like media literacy on the decline, people's reading skills on the decline. And I do think it is because we as humans are always going to read something physical differently than we read something on a screen. And I that's the best vocabulary I can put around that. But I just feel like our focus is more invested, and we're putting the time into it when it's like in our hands versus like on our phones.
Also, when you pay for something too, like anything that's online that's a free Substack, it's almost like a burner. Like, it's like, yeah, I care about this. Not that much because it's free. It's low investment. It's just something that I try out of care. And people are way more open to trying out something that's for free online. But the attention of something that you have like put in effort to find, purchase, discover that is real, it just speaks more to the audience that we want to reach.
People will also read it again, right?
Yeah,
like
that's
in their house.
Too.
They'll pick it up again. And one of my favorite types of praise that I've gotten is when friends have said, like, oh my God, I was at this other person's house and I saw your zine and I read it.
Yes.
I do love that.
The top praise we can get is someone quoting our work back to us. To me, that's it. That's the pinnacle. And again, that comes from like rereading, printing, like taking a second time to do a pass on something.
I mean, I think that is such a good point, the concept of rereading. As a kid, you know how it is when you're a kid. You have like a lot less stuff, right? And so every book that I had, I read like 20 times.
Oh, that's so interesting, because recently I've been thinking about with like the idea of rewatching and rereading. And when I was young, all I did was like re-listen to the Rent soundtrack and reread The Crucible and The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And these things are so core to my like lizard brain. And I'm trying to think about like, why don't adults reread? And I think that I was thinking about more kind of like woo-woo things about like safety and trust and comfort. But I think that there is something really too, like if you have less stuff and less books and less things, then you also reread them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a lot of part of it. I think also when you're a kid, you just have this amount of time that seems incomparable to any moment of your adult life. Like basically you go to college and you never get to be fully bored ever again. And so during the summer, I would just read all day, every day, and like, for example, one book that sticks in my brain, I probably read this book 100 times, is The Little Princess.
Ugh. Every girl's a princess, Miss Minchin. Didn't your father ever tell you that? Go to your room, Sarah. Go to your room.
I would act it out all the time with my dolls. Like, it was like a greatest hit. In fact,
it's one of my crying cues for sure.
It's so good, right? I was trying to
explain. The movie's exceptional too.
It is. I was trying to explain this.
Oh, I would watch that with you anytime. That Take My Heart soundtrack song is one of my main earworms.
It's so good. Yeah, it really holds up. And I was trying to explain this to my husband recently because we were watching something where it was mentioned and I was like, oh, you have no idea what a chokehold that book has on me even now. And he was like, what is it? Is it like what, like it's princesses? And I was like, no, not at all, actually.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's about war. It's about the war.
Yeah, it really is. It's about colonialism. It's about classism. And yeah, Shirley Temple in the original film. What a banger. Okay, so let's talk about the name Content Queen, because content is a word that gets a lot of conversation in my household. We call my office the content farm. Like sometimes I'm just in here for 8 hours making Instagram posts, which is so depressing to say out loud. But my husband released an album last year that he actually called Content. And our argument behind this was that all artists now, if you're a writer, if you're a musician, whatever you are, you end up having to also be a content creator because your success is contingent upon social media following. Basically, if you want a book deal, you have to have a lot of followers. If you want a record deal, it's the same thing. My friends who are actors are like, yeah, social media following is like a key part of any audition. And so art is now entangled with content creation to a point where you're like, where does it end? Like, what's the dividing line? So when I see the word content, I am immediately like struck by this being a significant name choice.
I think it's so funny that like the origin of our use of content in our name, because it comes from old media, I think. Like I think it comes from like a real sort of like Tina Brown era more.
Oh, yeah.
Because
yeah.
I think it was inspired by like content is king. I remember a phone call where we were brainstorming it, and that I think we said that saying, and then we were like, oh, but I believe we meant it as a sort of like pseudo-feminist, ironic, take on update on that phrase.
Yeah. I think when Jane and I first started Content Queen, we had much more of a heavy shtick about who we were as the editresses of Content Queen and what Content Queen was. And she wrote the phenomenal tagline that I think it still says on the website, like for like potent women of the Bay Area and those who live in awe of them or something. So just like everything that we did was really, and like Jane and I both have backgrounds in like improv and theater and stuff. And like, I feel like Content Queen, a lot of it was rooted in that at first, was like our personas, and the first 4 issues of Content Queen were very much written in the idea that we were like just utterly dedicated to content creation. Content was our main mode, and we can never change it. We also have like an amazing logo that is very representative of like old school media and content using Content Queen. So we are very married to it, but I think it comes from a place where I think Content Queen was a little bit different, which is when we were very like almost more like character based.
And it's supposed to be ironic, right?
Yes,
like the idea that someone would be utterly unselfconsciously devoted to the creation of content these days is so cringe.
But but people still are. Like, I think every time that I go to Venmo Content Queen, like, there's always, some sort of like, oh, I got this printed, I put this up. There are a couple of people who have content in their Venmo usernames. And if you go to, I think we're contentqueenzine.com and not Content Queen, because there's a woman who calls herself the Content Queen who just writes kind of like filler, content goes here. So people are still like true believers. And I think we thought it was very funny. And it is still very funny, the idea of like the creators of magazines being true believers in content.
And like one other way that I think the name is ironic is this sort of idea that content actually is king or queen, when like that's the whole kind of that's exactly wrong about what's going on. Like content is not king. So I think it's us ironically pretending as though it is, and like, exulting in that, delusion.
I can share the very devastating anecdote that the last time we were at a zine festival, I think it was just Jane and I were both like, this is our last zine festival, because we're just not really like fitting in, I think, with current zines, which I'm sure we'll get into later, for some reasons. There's always this like devastating moment at zine festivals, which I'm sure I've done to other people too, where someone comes up to your table, skims through something, and then moves on and decides not to buy it after perusing it. And one person came up to our stand, looked through an issue of Stress, Awkward, Envied, kind of made a face and said, "This is so content dense." And it's like, I don't think they saw that our name was Content Queen, but either way, it was kind of like, oh, like this really speaks to the time.
We've given you too much of the thing that you're buying.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that says something, because I will, I do these very like elaborate Instagram posts that are multiple slides with like pretty text heavy, because how else do you share any information of any like factual basis and detail without doing something like that? And I will still say that if I were to put all that text into a Google Doc, which is probably where it started, it's one page. And people will be like, will share it and be like, this is a really long read, but it's worth it. And I'm like, oh, friends.
Yeah.
You haven't read The Little Princess 100 times and it shows. It's like that book is really heavy in content.
It is.
It's like words after words. But yeah, I mean, I do think that like the fact that someone would think that your zine has a lot of content in it is pretty telling to where, I mean, I think all media is at this point, kind of. Something else I mentioned, I shared this in our notes for this episode, is this idea of like, I don't know, devaluing content to a certain extent. And there is this quote that my husband and I bring up like 3 times a week from Daniel Ek, the like CEO of Spotify. He tweeted this last year. He said, "Today, with the cost of creating content being close to zero, people can share an incredible amount of content." And I was just thinking like, wow, actually like creating real content is not free and has a tremendous amount of value and like equity behind it, I wonder if you feel that even in the zine landscape, which is like this physical object, that people just don't really care about content because it's just like something you scroll through and go to bed.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely a haunting quote. And I think that the thing that has impacted us the most, I will recommend to anyone who is reading this, the book Immediacy by the author Anna Kornblue. Immediacy, and then it's Kornblue, Kornbluh. And I feel like it does a really good job of capturing a lot of this. And I feel like the type of content that people want to read in the age of quick, immediate turnaround and their attention span for it just, people are making what is quick and easy and consuming what is quick and easy. And it just devalues, I think, a lot of stuff that Jane and I really care about, which is like research, like revision, slowness. There's a part of Immediacy where the author speaks to the rise of autofiction and the just like total rise of the first person. And in the olden days, there was more just like third person and omniscient narration. And I think you can see a lot of that in not just zines, but in what everyone is creating now, where things are really mired in the personal experience because it's just so much like quicker and easier and immediate to put out something that is, a zine that is like, this is a zine that I made about my trip to Japan. And like, this is a zine about everything in my morning routine. Like, this is a zine about what I bought this month. Like, doing that, it doesn't require research. It's just very quick. And it is, surely it's based on social media and like people have been doing this like online and just sharing more of themselves. But yeah, I think like it's really changed what people for sure want to buy, but also definitely what people think is entertaining. And to be a curmudgeon and a snake, I would say that's not entertaining, that it's self-serving to have quick personal content that's not, I would argue like, yeah, I guess it's still content. And in some ways I am being a gatekeeper about what is content and what isn't, but it's just not what I value and want to read myself.
Yeah. I can agree with all of that for sure. Do you have thoughts, Jane?
Yeah, I have talked to Molly about this before, and I had, the first time we talked about this, I had a sort of quibble because I was like, well, you and I have both written zines that are relatively personal. Like she wrote Memories of Fat Camp, and I wrote this zine that's just kind of like to get out my top 10 favorite movies. And then Molly wrote one, and then two of our parents wrote one, which is adorable. And you could argue that we're just doing the same thing. So I was like, maybe we're being like a little hypocritical. And I think we are a little bit, but I think there is I think we, again, going back to the audience, like we think a lot about being entertaining and making content that is going to be kind of like accessible and fun to read. And sometimes when I read more like autofiction style content, I just, I'm not able to connect as much. It feels kind of like I'm snooping on someone's private space versus that we're like sharing something together. And I don't know, I think it's just like what I prefer to consume is something where
it's a lack of imagination too. I don't know. I have complicated feelings about it because, like I said, I mean, I think that there's like telling personal stories is so important. I feel like that's how zines began. Like, I feel like a lot of the zines that I would order from catalogs when I was a kid were like autofiction and like the East Village inky and personal stories. But I think now, like in this current moment with like the tweet that you mentioned, that the same way that almost like writing something personal was more rebellious and interesting in the 80s and 90s, I feel like doing something that's like slower and maybe less personal and more like creative is, I think, like maybe more worthy of time for putting something subversive out into the universe.
I think you're so right, because I remember like when Sassy came onto the landscape, followed by Jane and the zines of that era of the 90s and the early aughts, they're really, what was groundbreaking about them is that they were so familiar, that it was someone talking to you as if they were your friend, that there was this first person narrative in most of the content of these publications. And they felt very fresh and innovative in comparison to what you might read in a 17, which always felt like someone older telling you how to do things.
Someone older pretending to be
young.
A 13-year-old girl and writing in a letter to the editor. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It felt inauthentic in comparison. If Sassy and Jane and like the zines that they kind of spurred had never arisen, I don't think the way YM and 17, all these other teen magazines had been speaking to young girls for generations would have felt so gross and fake. But in comparison, you couldn't help but be like, ooh, why would I listen to anything like that YM has to say? Like, so old-timey, you know? And I think that is why, like, when I think of 17, what really sticks to me is the humiliating stories, because they seem the most real, and they always involve someone wearing a maxi pad in a swimming pool. I swear to God, right?
Yes.
Or their prom dress getting stuck in the limousine door and it was raining. I don't know, but those stuck with me and not anything else in there. Also, that they were always saying that if you had green eyes, you should wear purple eyeshadow, which I've been trying. It doesn't work.
Can I hypothesize they stuck with you because they're funny? I mean, that's a big, I mean, I think
that's
it's weird that we
entertainment.
haven't talked about that yet, but like mainly what Molly and I are trying to do is make people laugh. Like that's kind of like the main theme throughout our zines. And that I think is something that differentiated Sassy from those competitors, is it had a sense of humor. It wasn't always trying to like write comedy, but it had a sense of itself and a sense of non-self-seriousness. It was like winking at you, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's true, that magazines were not funny unless you were getting like Mad Magazine or something, or like Cracked, but magazines were serious, right? And then of course, Vice came, and that was like a funny magazine too, even though it was just a toxic shithole, right?
That's what was so terrible about Vice, is it was hilarious.
Yeah.
I know, I hate it. I hate to think of the times I like laughed,
photos
cried.
they bullied babies in the don'ts.
Exactly. But yeah, it sucked. Definitely a relic of a specific era. I think what I have noticed as you were talking about the way just like content in general has shifted into this like very first person eye. I don't know, like everybody's writing a memoir of some sort, right? Like that main character energy. I actually have noticed that in some of the most popular books of the past few years, which are the only books that I ever read on a Kindle and not in real life. Like, someone's going to send me a mean email for saying this, and I'm accepting this right now. Okay.
I'm ready.
There's this book that they made a movie out of that I'm sure you've heard about all the drama involved with.
The Blake Lively one.
Yes, It Ends With Us. So I was like, you know what? This took book talk by storm. And now there's all this drama with Blake Lively. I'm going to read this book. I'll probably never see the movie. The book has to be better. The book is terrible. It was so poorly written. It felt like I was reading someone's Instagram for like 6 months straight. And I also could see why it was really popular, but it was like not good. And it didn't, everybody was really flat in the story. And I didn't care about anyone.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of times the metaphor that I think about for like the way that the importance of actual writing has gone downhill is I feel like I met my husband on OkCupid in 2011. And I think about how incredibly content dense, maybe 2010, I don't know.
True story.
How content dense dating profiles were at that time. Like people would just have these like giant text blocks about like loving Radiohead or Boondock Saints or whatever. And like the pictures were very much not a part of it. And then just over the years, it has just shifted to be like, okay, now it's like half, like there's a profile that's like half photos and half text. And now it's dating profiles and everything is just, it's like all photo based, and any text is like a caption of a photo or kind of like accompanying photos, except for like prompt questions. Maybe social media is a better metaphor for it than dating, because you've gone from like building a Facebook profile and writing status updates AIM style to like Instagram where it's like photo and caption, to TikTok where it's no caption. But just the importance of writing has really, really declined. And I think that is also like represented in the zines that you see, where writing is often in support of visuals. There's also like an interesting element where a lot of corporations are making zines now. And I think like the way that any kind of content can be fully monetized, like I think that there's almost kind of like a less pure maybe intent behind some zines. Like people put out zines as an extension of their brand or a way to like kind of build out their universe. Like, oh, this is the zine that comes with my olive oil company or my fashion company, or like I'm making a zine about things that I've bought. And I think that also kind of like reflects the way that like the trends have changed as well. Just like importance on personal brand building and importance on writing only in support of visuals.
Okay, y'all are talking about the kind of like goals of the content creation, or sort of like the style of it, right? That it seems almost like it's plucked from social media, which is so depressing, because it's like that's, if anything, what we want to get a vacation from when we're reading a book instead of social media. But there's also like, Amanda, like I feel the way you did about It Ends With Us. I feel the same way about The Guest. That book by Emma Klein. I heard all the buzz about it. It was like one of those books that everyone was reading. And then I was like, okay, let's read it, Jane. Cause I often like resist popular things, but I was like, Jane, read a popular thing, just do it. And I read it and it was so bad. It was so boring. Like it really seemed, I actually have a theory that it was written by like really bad AI, because it seemed like it was the same formula over and over again, right? She like goes to some place, right? She like finds an excuse to swim. Then she drinks something. A man is mean to her. She escapes. And then it repeated like several times. And that was the book. And you don't even hear how it ended. They don't tell you the ending. It made me so mad.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have always like categorized movies for myself as like, here's a movie that I would go to a theater and see. Here's a movie I would watch at home. Here's a movie I would watch on a plane, right? And the tiering is pretty obvious. The one I'm going to see IRL not on a plane is at the top, and the one I'm going to only watch on a plane is on the bottom. And I feel like so many of these like really popular books are the book version of I would just read this on a plane when I'm also maybe a little sedated, right? And like I'm trying to maybe go to sleep.
I think compared to The Guest, I feel like an author that I would say in praise for contemporarily would be like Otessa Moshfegh, because they do things that are based on personal experience, but really like if I think about things in my year, Rest and Relaxation, or Homesick for Another World, like there's stuff that's clearly based in their personal experience, but it is really twisted and transmuted to entertain. And then they've done these huge swings with doing like very difficult historical fiction. And I feel like the way, even though their content is very readable, it just shows like a level of imagination and thinking outwards that I think is like very commendable. And I think like ideally, like I'm not saying that we're the same as her in our zines, but I think like that to me is like a gold standard of someone who is like not always knocking it out of the park, but just doing it right.
And makes me laugh.
Yeah.
You know,
oh my God, those books are so funny.
They're so funny, but I will tell you, as interesting as you're talking about those, I was trying to think of her one book. It's a person's name.
Eileen,
thank you. Okay, so
yeah, that was great. It was like a disgusting work of historical fiction,
and it was hilarious,
which is what Jane and I aspire to do as well. Disgusting works of historical fiction.
I like that. I like that as a goal. And so I had somehow stumbled upon a conversation on Reddit that was, I don't know, someone was basically saying that they now hated her because they'd read Eileen and they were like, she must be a really bad person and she's portrayed herself in other books as a better person. And I was like, I mean, I didn't get involved, but if I would have, I would have been like, ma'am, this is fiction.
That's so real. So many people's art now is tied to their values and the way that they wish to be perceived. Jane was saying some things about this where I was so like smitten that I started writing down what she was saying the other day of like, you write this showing the kind of person you are, you buy it and it shows the kind of person you are. Like people can't necessarily like disconnect what art they choose to take in from their values. And I think zine fairs are like, sadly, like a pretty strong like case study in that.
So, I mean, when you go to a zine fair now, which of course now you're not going to, maybe, probably, I have a couple questions for you because I haven't been to one since before the pandemic. Do you find that people are selling a lot more non-zine merch?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I had a feeling because I mean, I'm going to tell you, like, over the years, I've been like, hey, here are all these ways you can support my work on Clotheshorse, which is quite a bit of work that is free. And people want to buy merch.
No, and I'm a former like high school and fifth grade English teacher, and I'm currently a writer. And the thing is, people just don't like to read. Like
I hate saying it, but I say it all the time.
Very few percent of people like to read. And if there's a zine fair, the most popular things there are going to be like enamel pins and patches because they don't require reading. They just express what you're into very quickly and simply.
Yeah. Me and Molly at a zine fair is like often us sitting there like silently fuming as like people's little doodads kind of like migrate onto our table.
Yes, get that doodad. Yeah.
Get that doodad out of here.
No, I felt that the last time I went to a zine fair, that's what I felt. I was like, oh, wow. So people are selling stuffed animals here and jewelry.
No, people were selling Beanie Babies. And it's like,
yeah.
This is something that you bought online and you're reselling. This is like a swap meet.
It was weird. Yeah, it felt really sad. So that was one question I had. And I agree. You said what I have been trying not to say, which is that people don't like to read.
No, they don't.
It's something that gets said in this household multiple times a day, generally related to something. The other thing I wanted to ask is like, in terms of like age, like what's the average age of someone who has a table at the zine fest, not necessarily the customer?
Oh,
that's
20s.
A great question.
They're in their 20s.
Yeah. Okay. And then the customers, what do you think?
Same.
Okay, wait. I was really hoping you would ask this question because this is one of my favorite topics that Molly and I distract ourselves
sometimes
with
we'll
at
make
fair.
Bingo cards.
We have customer segments.
Yeah.
And they're very distinct. And I would like for us to tell
Jane,
you.
Go through.
Can we tell you about them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Molly, please collaborate because I'm not going to get them all. But
okay.
So yeah, we have taxonomy.
This might be a little mean. There's one that I'm thinking of specifically that I'm like,
I know what you're thinking of. Okay, but I'm going to start with our with our target customer. Okay. This is something that we achieved clarity about painfully, right? So at zine fairs, I used to sit there and look for people who were like dressed really cool, because I'm like, ooh, you're flashy, you're hot, like I want you over here by my table. Those people do not read, right? Because they're too busy being hot. So they are not customers. They're a full waste of time and they usually don't even come and talk to us, okay? Our target customer is the sort of quiet, not that like fashionably or interestingly dressed, like very nerdy, like young woman or man or otherwise. or a non-binary person. No matter your gender, if you like are not honestly that trendy and you're kind of silent, you're for us. Am I right, Molly?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, one of my favorite, I'm going to be less nice than Jane. I think one of my favorite stock people at the zine fair is couple limply holding hands.
Oof. I can picture it.
Is that what you thought I was going to say?
No. Okay, I will now share one of my other favorites.
Yeah.
The older white man.
Yeah, okay. This is the classic.
He comes over to our table. He picks up a zine. He reads it silently, cover to cover.
Mm-hmm. Oh, rude.
Without speaking to us.
Or sometimes speaks to us and asks us so many questions when other people who could be potentially buying something are behind, and he's blocking by asking us inane, maybe flirtatious questions.
Yes, that's true. Okay. But typically when he finishes reading the zine, he closes it and says,
yeah.
Don't
and
like it.
And then he puts it down, and walks away. We don't like this customer, right? This customer is not doing anything for us. Who else? What are the other types? The transportation.
I was about to say
enthusiasts.
public transportation enthusiasts. We put out like a very, I think our it's almost sold 1,000 copies, by far our most popular thing. And whenever Jane and I talk about something with an audience focus, we're like, how can we get this again? Is we wrote more of a magazine, almost a coffee table book called Who Barted, that's about public transportation and like, is BART just a train or a metaphor for the Bay Area? So numbtots and people who've heard that there's something about BART at our table, which again, I think kind of comes into, is that noise me? Like identity. It's like, this is an object that shows that I'm like a Bay Area person or a transportation person. Mm-hmm. But it's a sale's a sale. A sale's a sale.
Molly, speaking of sales, Molly, I pulled the stats on purpose. It's sold over 1,000 copies. Let's get it right.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Which is more than many books.
Yeah.
Let's exult. Okay. Do we have any other key segments?
Pairs of Gen Z friends, one of whom has dark curly hair and one of whom has neon dyed hair.
This is the thing. I see this when I go other places.
Yeah, I think that's just like a person, a group of people that's at a zine fair, the same way that couple limply holding hands is a thing at a zine fair.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it.
I like this. Yeah. I can picture it. It feels right to me. So basically nothing has really changed much since the last time I went to a zine
and
fair.
I think this isn't a zine fair. This is just like a person at an event thing, is man with a hat that is covered in enamel pins, and not like a baseball hat, maybe like a fedora or a cowboy hat.
No.
Yeah.
Do you think the fedoras are going to come back?
I hope not.
I hope not too.
I don't think so. They're not. I think it's too. No. Anyway. You can cut that. I have nothing intelligent to say about that.
No, but it's just good to know that, because I really thought that like low rise denim would never ever come back, because but why would it? And then it is to a certain extent, and so I just am like, oh, our fedoras next, because in the trend cycle, fedoras were preceded by low rise jeans. In between, there's lots
never
of
left. No, just
and then but they're preceded by neck scarves. So like neck scarves will have to be, and then fedoras. But
oh my god, the way that you're talking about this sounds actually so like sinister, and like the way that you're auguring like the stylistic future is like,
and the way that I keep having them at hand.
Oh my! I know what. See, I'm right.
Yeah.
No, but as a buyer, I don't work as a buyer now. I work with a lot of different brands, but I give them like product. I do product and merchandising consulting with them. So like I help them develop products and interpret their data and things like that. And so my brain is like a database of how the trend cycles fit together, because I've lived through them and observed them from the past. And so I'm like, oh, well, if this is happening, then that means 6 months from now, it's going to be this. So you should get on it.
Interesting. I remember reading once that fashion from 20 years ago is what is cool. So like in the 90s, I feel like there's like a bell bottom and like denim revival. And then like in the 2000s, it was more 80s. Do you feel like there's something to that?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I will say like the last 5 or 6 years, things have gotten what has thrown a monkey wrench in that essentially is social media, right? Let's take a moment to thank some of the incredible small businesses who keep Clotheshorse going via their generous Patreon support. Slow Fashion Academy is a size-inclusive sewing and pattern-making studio based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Designer and fashion professor Ruby Gertz teaches workshops for hobbyists and aspiring designers so that anyone can learn the foundational skills of making, mending, and altering their own clothes. Several times per year, Ruby offers her flagship Sloper Workshop, an in-person 2-day pattern-making retreat where you will learn how to drape a set of basic block patterns that capture your unique shape and proportions. You can also use these basic block or sloper patterns as a foundation for infinite styles of garments that are custom made to your body's one-of-a-kind contours. Or compare your sloper to commercial patterns to see where you might need to alter the shape. No more guessing at full bust, flat seam, or sway back adjustments. Start with a foundation that fits. Ruby also provides professional design and pattern making services to emerging slow fashion brands and occasionally takes commissions for custom garments and costume pieces. She has also released several PDF sewing patterns for original designs under her brands Spokes and Stitches and Starling Petite Plus. I just want to also add here on a personal note that right now Ruby is actually working with me to create a one-of-a-kind, unique to me special dress that I will be wearing for all future Clothes Horse events, including live episodes later this year in the Pacific Northwest. I am so excited to work with Ruby because she is so talented and so knowledgeable about all things clothing creation. Check out the schedule for upcoming workshops, download PDF sewing patterns, and learn about additional sewing and design services at www.slowfashion.academy. And it's important for me to tell you that that's slowfashion.academy. Selena Sanders, a social impact brand that specializes in upcycle clothing using only reclaimed, vintage, or thrifted materials, from tea towels, linens, blankets, and quilts. Sustainably crafted in Los Angeles, each piece is designed to last in one's closet for generations to come. Maximum style, minimal carbon footprint. Shift clothing out of beautiful Astoria, Oregon, with a focus on natural fibers, simple hardworking designs, and putting fat people first. Discover more at shiftwheeler.com. Late to the party, creating one-of-a-kind statement clothing from vintage, salvaged, and thrifted textiles. They hope to tap into the dreamy memories we all hold. Floral curtains, a childhood dress, the wallpaper in your best friend's rec room, all while creating modern, sustainable garments that you'll love wearing and have for years to come. Late to the Party is passionate about celebrating and preserving textiles, the memories they hold, and the stories they have yet to tell. Check them out on Instagram at Late to the Party People. Vino Vintage, based just outside of LA. We love the hunt of shopping secondhand because you never know what you might find. Catch us at flea markets around Southern California by following us on Instagram at vino.vintage so you don't miss our next event. Dylan Page is an online clothing and lifestyle brand based out of St. Louis, Missouri. Our products are chosen with intention for the conscious community. Everything we carry is animal-friendly, ethically made, sustainably sourced, and cruelty-free. Dylan Page is for those who never stop questioning where something comes from. We know that personal experience dictates what's sustainable for you, and we are here to help guide and support you to make choices that fit your needs. Check us out at dylanpage.com and find us on Instagram at dylanpagelife&style. Salt Hats, purveyors of truly sustainable hats, hand-blocked, sewn, and embellished in Detroit, Michigan. Find us on Instagram at Salt Hats. Gentle Vibes Vintage. We are purveyors of polyester and psychedelic relics. We encourage experimentation and play not only in your wardrobe, but in your home too. We have thousands of killer vintage pieces ready for their next adventure. See them all on Instagram at Gentle Vibes Vintage. Thumbprint is Detroit's only fair trade marketplace, located in the historic Eastern Market. Our small business specializes in products handmade by empowered women in South Africa, making a living wage, creating things they love like hand-painted candles and ceramics. We also carry a curated assortment of sustainable and natural locally made goods. Thumbprint is a great gift destination for both the special people in your life and for yourself. Browse our online store at thumbprintdetroit.com and find us on Instagram at thumbprintdetroit. Vagabond Vintage DTLV is a vintage clothing, accessories, and decor reselling business based in downtown Las Vegas, Nevada. Not only do we sell in Las Vegas, but we're also located throughout resale markets in San Francisco, as well as at a curated boutique called Lux and Ivy, located in Indianapolis, Indiana. Jessica, the founder and owner of Vagabond Vintage DTLV, recently opened the first IRL location located in the Arts District of downtown Las Vegas on August 5th. The shop has a strong emphasis on 60s and 70s garments, single-stitch tees, and dreamy loungewear. Follow them on Instagram at Vagabond Vintage DTLV and keep an eye out for their website coming fall of 2022. So, I mean, when you go to a zine fair now, which, of course, now you're not going to, maybe, probably, I have a couple questions for you because I haven't been to one since before the pandemic. Do you find that people are selling a lot more non-zine merch?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I had a feeling because I mean, I'm going to tell you, like, over the years, I've been like, hey, here are all these ways you can support my work on Clotheshorse, which is quite a bit of work that is free. And people want to buy merch.
No, and I'm a former like high school and fifth grade English teacher, and I'm currently a writer. And the thing is, people just don't like to read. Like,
I hate saying it, but I say it all the time.
Very few percent of people like to read. And if there's a zine fair, the most popular things there are going to be like enamel pins and patches because they don't require reading. They just express what you're into very quickly and simply.
Yeah. Me and Molly at a zine fair is like often us sitting there like silently fuming as like people's little doodads kind of like migrate onto our table.
Yes, get that doodad.
Get that doodad out of here.
No, I felt that the last time I went to a zine fair, that's what I felt. I was like, oh, wow, so people are selling stuffed animals here and jewelry.
No, people were selling
t-shirts.
Beanie Babies. And it's this is something that you bought online and you're reselling. This is like a swap meet.
It was weird. Yeah, it felt really sad. So that was one question I had. And I agree. You said what I have been trying not to say, which is that people don't like to read.
No, they don't.
It's something that gets said in this household multiple times a day, generally related to something. The other thing I wanted to ask is like, in terms of like age, like what's the average age of someone who has a table at the zine fest, not necessarily the customer?
Oh, that's
20s.
a great question.
They're
20s. Yeah. Okay. And then the customers, what do you think?
Same.
Okay, wait. I was really hoping you would ask this question because this is one of my favorite topics that Molly and I distract ourselves
sometimes
with
we'll
zine
make
fair.
Bingo cards.
We have customer segments.
Yeah.
And they're very distinct. And I would like for us to tell
Jane,
you.
Go through.
Can we tell you about them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Molly, please collaborate because I'm not going to get them all. But so yeah, we have
this might be a little mean. There's one that I'm thinking of specifically that I'm like,
I know what you're thinking of. Okay, but I'm going to start with our with our target customer. Okay. This is something that we achieved clarity about painfully, right? So at zine fairs, I used to sit there and look for people who were like dressed really cool, because I'm like, ooh, you're flashy, you're hot, like I want you over here by my table. Those people do not read, right? Because they're too busy being hot. So they are not customers. They're a full waste of time and they usually don't even come and talk to us. Okay. Our target customer is the sort of quiet, not that like fashionably or interestingly dressed, like very nerdy, like young woman or man or otherwise, or non-binary person. No matter your gender, if you like are not honestly that trendy, and you're kind of silent, you're for us. Am I right, Molly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, one of my favorite, I'm going to be less nice than Jane. I think one of my favorite stock people at the zine fair is couple limply holding hands.
Oof. I can picture it.
Is that what you thought I was going to say?
No. Okay. I will now share one of my other favorites.
Yeah.
The older white man.
Yeah, okay. He
comes over to our table. He picks up a zine. He reads it silently, cover to cover.
Mm-hmm. Oh, rude.
Without speaking to us.
Or sometimes speaks to us and asks us so many questions when other people who could be potentially buying something or behind, and he's blocking by asking us inane, maybe flirtatious questions.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Okay. But typically when he finishes reading the zine, he closes it and says,
Yeah.
Don't
and
like
then he
it.
puts it down, no, and walks away. We don't like this customer, right? This customer is not doing anything for us. Who else? What are the other types? The transportation.
I was about to say
enthusiasts.
public transportation enthusiasts. We put out like a very, I think our it's almost sold 1,000 copies, by far our most popular thing. And whenever Jane and I talk about something with an audience focus, we're like, how can we get this again? Is we wrote more of a magazine, almost a coffee table book called Who Barted, that's about public transportation and like, is BART just a train or a metaphor for the Bay Area? So numbtots and people who've heard that there's something about BART at our table, which again, I think kind of comes into, was that noise me? Like identity. It's like, this is an object that shows that I'm like a Bay Area person or a transportation person. But it's a sale's a sale. A sale's a sale.
Molly, speaking of sales, Molly, I pulled the stats on purpose. It's sold over 1,000 copies. Let's get it right.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Which is more than many books.
Yeah.
Let's exult. Okay. Do we have any other key segments?
Pairs of Gen Z friends, one of whom has dark curly hair and one of whom has neon dyed hair.
This is the thing. I see this when I go other places.
Yeah, I think that's just like a person, a group of people that's at a zine fair, the same way that couple limply holding hands is a thing at a zine fair.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's it.
I like this. Yeah. I can picture it. It feels right to me. So basically nothing has really changed much since the last time I went to a zine
and
fair.
This, I think this isn't a zine fair. This is just like a person at an event thing, is man with a hat that is covered in enamel pins, and not like a baseball hat, maybe like a fedora or a cowboy hat.
No.
Yeah.
Do you think the fedoras are going to come back?
I hope not.
I hope not too.
I don't think so. They're not. I think it's too. No. Anyway. You can cut that. I have nothing intelligent to say about
No, but it's just good to know that, because I really thought that like low-rise denim would never, ever, ever come back, because but why would it? And then it is to a certain extent, and so I just am like, oh, are fedoras next? Because in the trend cycle, fedoras were preceded by low-rise jeans. In between, there's
they never left. No, just kidding.
And then, but they're preceded by neck scarves. So like neck scarves will have to be, and then fedoras. But
oh my god, the way that you're talking about this sounds actually so like sinister, and like the way that you're auguring like the stylistic future is like,
and the way that I keep having them at hand.
Oh my, I know. What? See, I'm right.
Yeah.
No, but as a buyer, I don't work as a buyer now. I work with a lot of different brands, but I give them like product. I do product and merchandising consulting with them. So like I help them develop products and interpret their data and things like that. And so my brain is like a database of how the trend cycles fit together, because I've lived through them and observed them from the past. And so I'm like, oh, well, if this is happening, then that means 6 months from now, it's going to be this. So you should get on it.
Interesting. I remember reading once that fashion from 20 years ago is what is cool. So like in the 90s, I feel like there's like a bell bottom and like denim revival. And then like in the 2000s, it was more 80s. Do you feel like there's something to that?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I will say like the last 5 or 6 years, things have gotten what has thrown a monkey wrench in that essentially is social media, right? And particularly not Instagram, because Instagram is old-timey, TikTok and like the constant parade of micro trends that defy that time space continuum of trends that has existed for a long time. And you're absolutely right. Like that is generally how these trends play out. Right now, it's just sort of like whatever someone posts and picks up traction is dictating trends as well. And so right now, it's like hard for me to look and say like, oh, this is concretely like the moment that we're in, except that I know that there's still like a decent amount of Y2K product out there on the like secondhand market that is affordable, which means that people want to buy new stuff that is like an update of that, right? So if we continue on that path, that means we're a couple years away from people wearing the headbands across their forehead, the like return to like live authentic festival aesthetic, all of that. So we'll see. I lived through it before. I wore a lot of those headbands, not going to lie. Let's talk about stressful, awkward, and envied, which I Oh my, first off, I'm just going to tell you that since I read this, I've read it multiple times now. I can't stop thinking about, of all things, my takeaway from this was, man, Paul Frank made some really good stuff.
And I got a Paul Frank wallet as I like to kind of like get an object that represents each zine when we finish
Oh, I love
them, or
that.
do something kind of like in celebration of it. And I got like a Paul Frank wallet on eBay is like $20, and it brings you such immense joy using it. And it's really well constructed.
I think I'm going to get one.
You
I
should.
started looking the other day.
Yeah.
I was also talking to a client this week, and I was like, I think you should look at the Paul Frank archive to get some ideas about how we can apply your art to other product. And we pulled up, we went onto eBay and we're looking. And I was just
There's
like,
a lot of Julius there. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of Julius. He's like, what an icon. Okay, so Stressful, Awkward, and Envied is not specifically about Paul Frank, but he is a character in it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Why don't you, if you were going to give like a 1 to 2 sentence synopsis of what this zine is, what would you tell people?
Yeah. Stress, Awkward, and Envied is description of different iconic late 90s, early 2000 brands based on research and then interviews, which was my favorite part, from people who worked at the stores in the mall and modeled for the catalogs occasionally.
And what made you decide to do this?
It's interesting. It originally I'm very interested in clothing as a means of identity shifting and just like, who am I now? And I think initially it actually started as like a personal exploration of my memories of different stores in the mall and who I was at the time and going from store to store. And I even shared a draft of that with Jane and much more about like my angst being someone in the 90s who didn't have like a clear identity and who was like a plus size kid trying to shop and just feeling unmoored and like a loser. And then Jane and I were both thought the most interesting part is the research. And I was the most interested, I think, in the idea of interviewing. And I think interviewing people who worked at the stores and finding out a more universal truth about these brands just felt much more resonant than just writing about my own personal experience, which I think relates pretty clearly to what we were talking about before of like, it's a much more worthwhile pursuit to find out about something larger than yourself. And I think especially digging more into the brands beyond what people can find out on Wikipedia and just really finding out personal stories. I found out so much that I wouldn't have otherwise.
And I'll tell you, like, for a zine, this is pretty. It has 73 pages?
Yeah. And it's designed to it took a long time to lay out. We design our work in Figma, which is meant for like product design and UI design. But the way that we ended up like shaping it was just taking a lot of screenshots and scanned in pages from the preppy handbook and just like oftentimes tracing it, like making grid and like tracing it over in Figma, recreating it. So it took a long time to make with the research, the writing, the layout.
I mean, first off, love that you used Figma because I use that for everything for Close Horse. Big Figma
really?
fan. Yeah. I'm going to tell you, like, as I was looking through this, reading it, I can feel how much work went into this. Like, this is no joke, right? Because you interviewed all these people that the design is on point. It's really information dense. And I don't want to give away the whole thing because I really want people who listen to this conversation to go buy it because...
Yes, www.contentqueenzine.com.
Yeah, because it's going to make them so happy. Like, they're going to be so glad that they have this because since Kat sent it to me, I have read it multiple times. I've just picked it up and paged through it and read a page or two when I've just been like stressed out or needed to like stop doom scrolling. Like, it is a source of comfort and nostalgia, and it's funny, and it's also, I think, especially for people who've maybe never worked retail, it is really insightful. I also think it's a way that we can start thinking about how much we wrap our personal selves up in the brands that we're into at the time. And I'm working on this episode will be a part of a series about how we think about brands. Strangely enough, this is going to be like a precursor to it because I think especially millennials and Gen X too, like browns have always been like a part of our personality,
Yeah.
right? And I don't, it's hard for me to say as much for Gen Z and younger because Shein isn't a brand, right? Like Goodwill isn't a brand. Like these people are buying clothes and accessories from other places that service
It's
many, many types of aesthetics. But when we were teenagers, like this shit was like dialed
Yeah.
in, right? So I wanted to hear from you. First off, I'm glad that you included rave in this.
Yes. It was the store that captured my imagination the most in my local mall. Because I think, like I said, I was like pretty nerdy and didn't shop a lot and didn't have, I think, strong ties to brand. Like I shopped once or twice a year and bought like what fit. I feel like I wore a lot
Yeah.
of like brown and black. And but there were so many brands that I just had such amazing strong associations with because you hang out at the mall a lot. So there were not brands that I felt passionately about the way that as a millennial I still do today. Like I'm a loyalist to some brands, but
Yeah.
there were brands that just played such a huge picture in my mind. Like my sister and I would just like make up stories about what happened in certain stores. And yeah, like the idea of the kind of like I imagined Wet Seal as being perpetually like the cover of Wild Things, the VHS.
Oh
like
my gosh.
perpetually, like if I stepped into Wet Seal, there'd just always be like adult-looking teens coming out of a pool, and like my idea of contempo, like yeah,
beaching themselves.
exactly. Yeah,
I mean, I think this kind of fits with the Wet Seal that was in the King of Prussia Mall outside of Philadelphia, which to me was the most epic mall. Like I love
it's
malls.
famously it's like a Mall of America style mall,
right?
I
love
went there when I
malls.
visited a friend from college once. She was like, "If you want to understand my hometown, we need to go to KOP."
Yeah, I mean, it's an experience, right? It's actually two malls that are joined together somehow. And I love malls. Even to this day, I'm sad that malls are sort of sad now. But the Wet Seal in the King of Prussia Mall, for reasons that I do not understand, because as far as I can tell, the King of Prussia Mall is not built on a slant. The necklaces on the mannequins were always over one boob.
Oh,
All
because
of
they
them.
slipped because they were so wet.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, it fits, because I was always like, whoa, shit happens in Wet Seal.
Yeah.
Like,
no,
it had that vibe of like girls were sloppy and sexy in there, and it was wild. Yeah. So
I wanted to be a Wet Seal girl so bad. That was my aspirational mall brand.
Mine was Delia's, which wasn't a mall brand. Like, it was just a catalog brand for me.
Yeah. I was obsessed with Delia's. Like, those girls in that magazine seemed like they were just like so cool, and they did cool stuff, and people respected them.
And, imagine I had to like, one of my good friends modeled for Delia's, and I included hers is the interview that's in. So can you imagine the way that I tried to like play it cool when I found out that?
Yeah,
like,
I'm sure.
When I first met her, just kind of like, oh, like cool. And then like moving on, but just like in my mind, just like, oh my God.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would have had a hard time staying cool. I loved Delia's so much. There used to be a Delia's outlet in Reading, Pennsylvania. Yes.
I didn't include this in the zine because, like I mentioned, there were a bunch of, like, I made it much less personal during the second edit, but a very intense personal memory that I have about the Delia's outlet that I went to was that there was a giant communal changing room.
Yeah.
And that's a very hard thing for
traumatic
girls.
Yeah.
Especially since I feel like so much of what Delia sells is bathing suits perpetually. So yeah, I just remember this like chaotic and scary changing room with so many girls and their moms just like feeling so tense the time that I went there. And then like I think buying like pajama pants.
Yeah, and I remember going to my grandmother would take me there periodically, like once a year maybe, and I could spend like $100 and have like 20 Roxy t-shirts or something, or like whatever was relevant at that time. I worked with a woman at Urban Outfitters like early in my buying career who had been a buyer at Delia's and then Alloy, and when I found that out, I was like, oh my God, you are the coolest person ever. And she was like, yeah, it's all just work. And I was like, no, but like, and she was like, we work at Urban Outfitters. People think we have the coolest job ever too. Just remember that. And I was like, oh, you're right.
The realities of retail are different than the perceptions of retail.
Wait, can I ask Amanda, like, what did you think of the urban section in the zine?
Yeah.
I mean, I felt like it was on point. If you ever wanted to do a fully like working at Urban Zine, I would love to do that because it is, It's a really crazy place to work, or at least it was.
Can I ask you a very specific question about working at Urban Outfitters or hiring people to work at Urban Outfitters?
Sure.
I did a group interview to work at Urban
Oh,
Outfitters
God, I'm
once,
so sorry.
and they told me, okay, great, you have the job. You just need to take this personality test.
I forgot
And
about
then
that.
I did not get the job off the personality test. So what did I think there was one question that I remember that was like, if you catch a coworker shoplifting, would you turn them in? And I think I said no. Is that what undid me, or are there other things that they test for?
I mean, that definitely undid you. But from what I'd heard, I can't remember what that test was called. It had a name, and how we would score it is you would call this 1-800 number, and you would just type in the numbers that the person had answered.
That's so cool.
And then it would give you a verdict, right? And so
it would be like hired or pass.
Exactly. So we would all be like, all of us who were managers who like had to do that, we were like, what's the code here? Not that we're supposed to know, right? But what is it? And someone who's like, once again, this, who knows? They were like, well, I have a friend who works in loss prevention at home office, and they said that there is one question on there that if you answer incorrectly, immediately it doesn't matter what else you answered, you fail because they know you're a liar. And that question was, if you knew you could sneak into a movie theater and see a movie for free, would you not do it? And if someone said, no, I still wouldn't do it, that meant that they were a liar. And there was another question on there that was,
if you would do it.
If you found out that your mom stole something with a value of less than $1, would you call the police? And if someone answered yes on that also was like, this person is a liar.
So,
So,
wow,
I don't know.
design.
Yeah. Anyway, who knows? We were always trying to crack the code just so we knew. But, I mean, I would say like I worked in a bookstore in high school. It was a very different experience. They, for some reason, were like, even though you're 16, here's the keys to the store, and you take the money to the bank every day. It was very strange. So I still had this idea of the people who worked in the other stores at the mall, like the clothing stores, were probably like living the dream, right? And that their entire life was filled with reverence towards them because they worked in these cool stores, right? Like I can't, like, oh my God, if you worked at like Wet Seal, people probably hugged you all the time or wished they could touch you or sniffed your perfume with joy or whatever. And then I worked at Urban Outfitters, and it was fucking terrible. And people were horrible to me all the time, and the company was horrible to us all the time, and it was really grueling work. And I was like, oh, retail sucks. Wow. But people would be like, you must have the best job ever. And then when I became a buyer for Urban, people who worked with me were like, yeah, we have the world's dream jobs right now, don't you know? And I was like, really? Is this this is someone's dream job? I'm so sad, because it sucks. What were you surprised to learn as you interviewed people?
I think that I was surprised. I think I expected all brands to just be evil. Stop, period.
Yeah.
And I think that the times that I was surprised were when brands were just, this is very like lower expectations, but when brands weren't evil. Like I think I really saw the importance of Hot Topic, and I think in some ways Hot Topic came off the best in the zine.
Yeah.
Because it was really a place where a lot of people who worked there built community, and it just was a place for teens to explore an identity in a very clear, consistent way, and none of the employees had anything terrible to say about it in the same way. Because I grew up in upstate New York, and I think the brand is a little younger than I am. I hadn't heard of Hollister. All of the Hollister stuff was very like, where I think that was the worst of the brands that I featured. Everyone else, Abercrombie, whatever, Abercrombie and Hollister are owned by the same people. I feel like a lot of other brands were just kind of like table stakes capitalism, but Hot Topic. And we have a friend who helps us with these zines who grew up in rural Siberia. And when he was reading about Hot Topic and looking at the pictures, he was like, we would have loved that there. And I feel like Hot Topic really, it came off well as just both a place, how they treated the employees, and just a place to express and experiment.
My husband and I both, one of the many reasons that we ended up together is we both really love malls. And so sometimes we'd be on like a random road trip and be like, let's just go to that mall, And anywhere we went, when we would go into Hot Topic, there would be people just hanging out there who were friends. And that has always like, I don't know, that just like gets me right here. As a person who grew up in a small town and was like the town weirdo, like where was my Hot Topic? Yeah. Like I'm happy for people.
I work with a lot of Gen Z people, I love telling them my culture is not your costume when they wear clothing from that time period. But one of them who loves having deep talks with me, when he was like helping us a little bit with this zine and like looking at it and asking questions about it, he was like, I really wish that I had a third space. So I think that like the malls are missed.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to hear that Hot Topic was like actually the most sweet store out of all of these, because my memory of Hot Topic in the mall was this kind of stigma that was put on it as like, oh, this is a store for like posers, you know, where you
Totally.
can like buy
for posers.
this alternative identity, which is so actually weird, right? Because Hot Topic was the most transparent about the fact that like, yeah, you are coming here and trying on literally like weird different identities. Whereas the other stores were so much more insidious, right? Like Abercrombie, it was the same thing. It was also cosplaying as this like rich, preppy asshole, right? But like, they were more subtle about it in the way the branding came across. And so they didn't get dinged for it. Well, in a different way they did.
Definitely include that. That's really smart.
Oh, thanks, Mom.
Yeah, no, I think you're so right on that. And I will say like Hot Topic has changed a lot, right? I read an article, I don't know, it might have been back in like 2021. It was a profile in the New York Times about how Hot Topic has been so successful.
I read that. It's just kind of like generalist, like Stranger Things, Japanese toy. But just
exactly,
still,
it's like pop culture.
Because Hot Topic was started as a store for band t-shirts. And so, and not just a certain kind of band, like all bands. And so I think that just Hot Topic is a place in a store for teens to try on their identities, I think transparently. Like all of shopping is trying on identities. But I think Hot Topic is the most radically transparent.
I think so too. And you know what else? Like that article cited that one of the reasons, now I don't know how Hot Topic is doing right now. I could see it going either way. But why they were so successful at that point is now you would have multiple generations of people coming into Hot Topic together, like parents and kids, and like shopping together.
Oh, that's crazy, because I only shopped with my mom and my grandma, and I would never go into Hot Topic with either of them.
No, it sounds crazy.
Terrifying.
But I guess now if you're like if you're like 13 now, your parents are probably, you know, like a cooler age. I don't know.
Yeah,
like
that's true. That's why young kids like pavement.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's so weird, right? Okay, so the last question I would just ask you about that, about stressful, awkward, and envied, is like after like doing your deep dive into all of these brands, many of which do not exist now or exist in some very different incarnation at this point. I feel like when I go to the mall now, all the stores kind of feel the same. What brand do you think of that era you would like to see come back and it's like preserved in amber form? Like, is there anything that would be relevant at this point?
Okay, I think my answer is not, it's not like a cool answer, but I feel like there's kind of like a relief when we were younger in there being kind of like brands that were more clearly for kids and that were less cool. Like buying just like straightforward stuff at like Gap Kids, Limited to even like Paul Frank to some extent. Yeah. And I feel like now there's so much like pressure on young people to just like be trendy and wear like the same stuff. And I think that like any store that represented a lower bar for childhood dressing is what I would want to bring back.
I think that is so true. I mean, out where I live, mostly you see kids wearing pajamas or they're Amish and they're wearing Amish clothes. But I do remember before we moved out here, we were still living in the city, that I would sometimes look at kids and I'd be like, wow, like I think I have that outfit. And that kid is like 10, you know? It does feel like there's less kids' clothes.
Yeah, it's just more relaxing and restful. It's like, I'll just go to, and then I think like I think also like a department store. Like I think department stores having a comeback, I think would be like really interesting.
I think so too. I mean, where I grew up, there was a department store, like a local chain called the Bon-Ton. And it was kind of like the coolest place at the mall to buy clothes. It signified that your parents had some money because they had like, you know, Guess and like Esprit and like brands like Calvin Klein and things like that.
Oh my God. All my favorite brands.
And like it was nice, right? Like it wasn't like if you go to Macy's now, you're like, Man, I'm like a little depressed when you leave, right? You're like, I'm just here to use the bathroom. Basically, back then they were like, this is where you could be on the forefront of like fashion.
Yeah.
You know, I agree. Department stores in Japan are sick that way, where they
Oh
have
my
that
God, I'm
live.
going to Japan next week. I know.
If
But
you,
it's not my first time going to Japan, so I know.
yeah, you know. I always spend so much time in the malls in Japan, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. They make me really happy. If you're enjoying this episode, then this is a great time to remind you that my work here at Clotheshorse is made possible by the support of listeners like you, just like NPR, and these great small businesses. Please go give them your support. Blank Cass, or Blanket Coats by Cass, is focused on restoring, renewing, and reviving the history held within vintage and heirloom textiles. By embodying the love, craft, and energy that is original to each vintage textile as I transfer it into a new garment, I hope we can reteach ourselves to care for and mend what we have and make it last. Blank Cass lives on Instagram at _Cass, and a website will be launched soon at blankcass.com. Located in Whistler, Canada, Velvet Underground is a velvet jungle full of vintage and secondhand clothing, plants, a vegan cafe, and lots of rad products from other small sustainable businesses. Our mission is to create a brand and community dedicated to promoting self-expression, as well as educating and inspiring a more sustainable and conscious lifestyle, both for the people and the planet. Find us on Instagram at shop_velvetunderground or online at www.shopvelvetunderground.com. St. Evens is a New York City-based vintage shop that is dedicated to bringing you those special pieces you'll reach for again and again. More than just a store, St. Evens is dedicated to sharing the stories and history behind the garments. 10% of all sales are donated to a different charitable organization each month. New vintage is released every Thursday at wearstevens.com with previews of new pieces and more brought to you on Instagram at wear_st.evens. That's Wear St. Evens. Country Feedback is a mom and pop record shop in Tarboro, North Carolina. They specialize in used rock, country, and soul and offer affordable vintage clothing and housewares. Do you have used records you want to sell? Country Feedback wants to buy them. Find us on Instagram at Country Feedback Vintage and Vinyl, or head down east and visit our brick and mortar. All are welcome at this inclusive and family-friendly record shop in the country. Republica Unicornia Yarns, handmade yarn and notions for the color obsessed, made with love and some swearing in fabulous Atlanta, Georgia by head yarn wench Kathleen. Get ready for rainbows with a side of giving a damn. Republica Unicornia is all about making your own magic using small batch, responsibly sourced, hand-dyed yarns and thoughtfully made notions. Slow fashion all the way down and discover the joy of creating your very own beautiful hand-knit, crocheted, or woven pieces. Find us on Instagram at Republica_Unicornia_yarns and at www.republicaunicornia.com. Picnic Wear, a slow fashion brand ethically made by hand from vintage and dead stock materials, most notably vintage towels. Founder Danny has worked in the industry as a fashion designer for over 10 years, but started Picnic Wear in response to her dissatisfaction with the industry's shortcomings. Picnic Wear recently moved to rural North Carolina, where all their sewing and accessories are now designed and cut, but the majority of their sewing is done by skilled garment workers in New York City. Their customers take comfort in knowing that all their sewists are paid well above New York City minimum wage. Picnic Wear offers minimal waste and maximum authenticity. Future vintage over future garbage. Cute Little Ruin is an online shop dedicated to providing quality vintage and secondhand clothing, vinyl, and home items in a wide range of styles and price points. If it's ethical and legal, we try to find a home for it. Vintage style with progressive values. Find us on Instagram at Cute Little Ruin. Is there a little bit of Italy in your soul? Are you an enthusiast of pre-loved decor and accessories? Bring vintage Italian style and history into your space with the pewter thimble. We source useful and beautiful things and mend them where needed. We also find gorgeous illustrations and make them print-worthy. Tarot cards, tea towels, and hand-picked treasures available to you from the comfort of your own home. Responsibly sourced from across Rome, lovingly renewed by fairly paid artists and artisans, with something for every budget. Discover more at thepewterthimble.com. Deco Denim is a startup based out of San Francisco, and it sells clothing and accessories that are sustainable, gender fluid, size inclusive, and high quality, made to last for years to come. Deco Denim is trying to change the way you think about buying clothes. Founder Sarah Mattis wants to empower people to ask important questions like, where was this made? Was this garment made ethically? Is this fabric made of plastic? Can this garment be upcycled? And if not, can it be recycled? Sign up at decodenim.com to receive $20 off your first purchase. They promise not to spam you and send out no more than 3 emails a month, with 2 of them surrounding education or a personal note from the founder. Again, that's decodenim.com. Let's talk about Wendy's World. So I feel really lucky. I got to have Wendy Mullen on my other podcast that is sort of like on ice right now, The Department. And it was like life dream unlocked, kind of. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like really, like you, Molly, meeting someone or having a friend who was a model at Delia's. It felt like that. Like I was like, here's this thing I always wanted to be a part of.
Oh yeah. It was a great episode. I listened to it. It's great.
Oh, good. Yeah, it was really exciting. It was really, really exciting. And basically what had happened is I had talked about how Built by Wendy was so influential on me when we did a series about the aughts that she reached out to us. It was like the craziest thing. How would that happen? I don't know. Anyway, people listen to podcasts, I guess. So Jane, I know that your zine, Wendy's World, was like your project, really. So I want to hear a little bit about how this project came to happen.
Okay, well, first of all, The Department, y'all's episode was like a major source for it. I loved that episode. Oh, yeah. And I think I cite you all. I think there's like a line that's like, you should go listen to this episode. I think basically your episode was a key piece of pre-research I did before interviewing Wendy.
Oh, yeah, there it is. It's in tiny print.
Yeah, I should have made it bigger. Sorry.
No, it's exciting. I mean, I got to send a picture of this to Kim so she knows. Because I'm always like, we should do The Department again. It's like more fuel for my file.
No, I absolutely relied on the interview that y'all did as the background for the interview I did with her. So I felt like I was filling in the blanks essentially of the follow-up questions that were particularly interesting to me when I interviewed her. So how it came to be, Molly, do you remember? Because I feel like Molly and I had just always both been obsessed with Built by Wendy. So we would talk about it intermittently. And I think it was just, that's kind of how we come up with ideas for zines, is we're just like yapping. And then we're like, oh my God, we're both just so obsessed with this thing. And that's often like when we have that overlap. So I think initially we were supposed to write it together, and then I kind of stole it. And I was like, I'm going to do this solo. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Just basically it was first the desire to make a zine about Wendy, and then it was specifically like it should be a fan zine. Like it should really just be like a celebration and obsession.
It's a really nice like medium as the message sort of project to me as a big fan of it in Jane's work, that I feel like the way that Jane was so smart about laying out the zine, because the way that it looks is so of the time and in tribute to like the pinnacle and heyday of Wendy's
really
work.
is. It is so on point for the fanzines of that era. And anyone who sees this, once again, we're not going to give it all away, because I just think if you're listening to this, you should just go order these zines for yourself, because they will bring you so much happiness. And
www.contentqueenzine.com.
Yeah, there you go. But also just like, these are things that are meant to be experienced in real life, right? Like we're never going to be able to, even if we read this whole thing aloud, cover to cover in this conversation, you would miss the vibe of it that is so important, because this feels so on point for all of the best like fanzines of the early aughts, late 90s. Like you really nailed the aesthetic in every single way. So kudos to you.
Thank you. That's something that we're really trying to do more and more. And again, kind of like a difference of how Content Queen has evolved, like capturing different time periods in our visual design is something that's really important to us.
And like I will say, like once again, having a whole array of your work on my desk right now, everything looks different. Everything is so true to the inspiration or source material of it all. Like I really love the birth order one because I still
Did you have the
them.
book?
And all the books that were made by this writer or
that's an ultimate zine for the heads.
It is. And this was the first thing I pulled out of the envelope that you sent me. And I was like, man, those books had a grip on me for a very long time. Like if I met someone new, maybe on OkCupid, who knows, I had to go home and look them up in the book and see like, could this work or not? You know, like I more than any like I don't know, for many of us of a certain age or a certain type of person, those books were like the most important piece of literature in our homes. Maybe not literature, like it was like an encyclopedia. I don't know. No decisions were made.
Yeah, it was reference.
It was very important, right? Like
yeah.
Mine were always in the living room on the coffee table, just in case emergency, need to look someone up. So anyway, I will say, like, once again, like for anyone who's listening, like you should really go check out these zines, like at contentqueenzine.com, because like they really nailed the source material, like aesthetically, which I think is really important. So tell us a little bit about like how did this all happen? Like how are you like, hey Wendy, hi, big fan, want to do a zine? Like how did you approach her and what did she say? I mean, she's cool as shit. I'll just say.
Oh my God. Yeah. Wendy is an absolute doll. Like, I'm such a fan. Like, yeah, all I had to do was email her and just pitched her. I was like, yeah, we make these zines. I think I told her like the kind of stuff we do and that I wanted to interview her. And she was just like, yeah, sure. Like she said something like, oh yeah, that's like a really cute idea. I love zines. Like, I'll do it. And that was it.
She's so cool. And if you're like a cool, creative person, she's like, yeah, cool. Like, because she's a cool creative person. And she just like, I don't know. I wasn't sure what to expect, what it was going to be like to talk to her. And part of it was because I was like, to me, there was this like extended window of my life where literally probably the coolest person I could imagine was Wendy Mullen. And I was, right? And I was absolutely. Like, this is like... Yeah. If you were never the like target audience of her brand or her vibe, I certainly could never afford her clothes, but like she just had like such a grip on me as like the coolest living person. And to talk to her and have her just be like this like awesome person was amazing. Because, you know, one time Johnny Depp came into Urban Outfitters in New York City and I had to wait on him and he was a total piece of shit. But then another time I helped Ricky Lake get shoes and she was really, really nice and told me I had pretty eyes. So I don't know. My experiences with celebrities have been mixed, right? But telling. But so I just wasn't sure, you know, people are like, don't meet your heroes or whatever. I was just like, I don't know. So tell me what it was like.
Yeah, I was nervous. I was intimidated. And then she's just kind of, like you said, so down and so clearly, I guess, aligned on just making cool stuff. So, you know, she was very down to earth in terms of like, oh, you're making a zine just like I make clothes. And like, so it felt like at least there was some sense that it wasn't like I was just an annoying person interviewing her. It was more like, oh, I'm another creative person. And so we're just like talking. She definitely came across to me as really tough, which I loved. Like, that's not something that you would automatically know about her from her clothes per se, although maybe from the brand you would get it a little bit. But yeah, like her being like tough and hard as nails, like was a big theme of what we talked about, which was my favorite. So yeah, I mean, once we got into the conversation, I don't remember it being scary or anything. Just really interesting.
Yeah. Her story was really surprising to me, but like in retrospect, I was like, man, I just like love her even more now.
I kind of want to be her. Like, honestly, she is a hero. Like, she is like one of the women that if I could like live my life in the way she has, I would like to, because she stayed completely true to herself. She's been insanely productive and prolific. She's had a very strong vision. She's like been a leader and done her own thing. She's incredible.
No, she's amazing. And I feel like, I don't know. Obviously I just reread this week and I was thinking about her again and I was like, wow, she just feels like more relevant than ever to me. I can't explain it. Like this level of authenticity and sort of like DIY-ness that we need more than ever right now, whether it's in clothing or any other thing that people make. I just think, like the fast fashion era has really like distanced us from like creation, unless it's like a weird craft kit that we got at the clearance at Joann, so I don't know. She just feels like, I'm like, how do we get Wendy back on? Like, let's get the next generation to know about her,
I definitely, when she put her business up for sale on Instagram, I definitely contacted multiple people to be kind of like, could we?
Could be sick. Yeah. And also, I will say, like, her designs are like timeless. And I look at so many of the more like indie brands of now that have like this deep following, and I see her in there.
Definitely.
She definitely had an impact on generations of like designers and makers.
I really liked Jane's work around mapping like her influences and people that she influenced.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm glad that you brought up the guitar straps because most people forget about those.
Oh yeah, those are so crucial.
I feel like whenever, it was like if someone had one of her guitar straps, I was like, oh, they're like really cool.
Yeah, one of the things that I really admire about her is how many ideas she has. Like, that was one of the other themes of our conversations where, I would be asking like, oh, like, how did you come up with this or that design or concept? And she was like, I just literally have so many ideas and like obsessions. Like, she's also such a fangirl. She's a huge fangirl for movies and music. And so she's just so inspired all the time but then she's not like retentive or stingy with her production. She just like trusts that there will be more inspiration. So she tries to just cram all her ideas into as many things as possible. And that is like the origin of her style, which is so fascinating, which is like the mashup thing. It was like trendy at the time, but it was very authentic to her. She was like, but I want to do resort, but I also want to do like Alice in Wonderland. And so I'm going to make Alice in Wonderland resort clothes because I want to do both these things at once. So it was like an accommodation to her hyper creativity that created this like very absurd world that she would constantly recreate. I don't know. I just, that fertile creative aspect of it is just so inspiring.
It really is. I mean, do you think like, let's just say that the timeline was different for humanity and Wendy was actually born in like 1998. Do you think, like, what do you think Built by Wendy in 2025 would be like? Like, do you think brands can still do what she did, which was like you were saying, this, I don't know, like this amalgamation of like all of your inspiration coming out into a finished product instead of being like really stuck on like personal brand and making deck after deck of like, this is the season's concept or the season's trend, or having to learn like the other thing that I loved about her is she never once was like, well, the trend at that time was that this, so I had to like make that, right? Like, she was divorced from that stuff. Maybe it didn't exist in the same way, but now if you want to make a clothing brand, you have 1,000, and I mean like a million voices in your ears telling you like, well, you got to make this, and you got to do this, and you got to do this, and don't forget about that. Do you think that Built by Wendy could like, launch in 2015 and be thriving right now?
I guess not. I mean, I guess one part of it is like, how do you define thriving? Because her brand never became
in my mind
giant,
it was,
right?
yeah.
And she chose that. Like, part of her story that either she talked to you all about or also me was like the moments where she did have bigger brands come and try to acquire her, and she decided not to go that way. So I think she avoided it. So I guess like maybe a brand could launch today and survive, but only if it had very modest aspirations. But I'm guessing the economics of
Yeah,
that would not
probably
work
not.
out. So I guess the answer is no. You probably know better than I do. But it felt like, in terms of like the trendiness, like her, again, a lot of the aspects of what she happened to make were very zeitgeisty, right? The like mashup nature of it, the whimsicality, the like indiness, the like nostalgia. It was all there. It was all cool, but during a broader time period. So she wasn't after like micro trends. She would make her own micro trends each season. But then generally she was part of this like culture, I think, of like indie alt, 90s style. So I guess to the extent that there is like a larger ecosystem right now in which that style could flourish, maybe she could. But if it's like only trends that we're chasing, I don't know. Like I'm thinking like the brands that to me seem most similar to her today are things like Samantha Pleat or like Lisa Says Ga, where it's like, yeah, there's some like really weird, random, quirky things they do, but they are very trend driven. Like you go to like Lisa Says God, and it's like, oh, we're seeing so many of like fanciful bows, and we're going really hard on the fanciful bows. And it's not just like she does it once and then moves on. It's like we're obsessed with it.
I think those are really good comparisons, actually, and I actually think of like Samantha Pleat is really like the generation between Wendy and Lisa Says Ga. And so it's good to see her still around, but like Samantha Pleat started in an era where you had to start posting stuff on Instagram, whereas like Wendy didn't really have that. Now Lisa Says God has to be hardcore about like social media and these trends that are social media driven. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Wendy is so creative that she could probably do anything.
Yeah. What I think is so special about her clothing that you all have touched on, that I think is like the difference between like a Lisa Says God sort of brand, is I feel like her clothes are so personal based on her own obsessions. Whereas I think something like by Lisa Says Ga, I mean, like I love sardines. I love the sardine Lisa Says Ga shirt that Jane gave me, but it's kind of like a general trend, like bows, it's less about the creative whims and like you could kind of like, by buying Built by Wendy's clothing, it's like you see the cultural pillars that have formed her brain. And I don't really think other brands are like that today.
I think that is so true. That like you really nailed it there. That she is like she was just making what was interesting to her, whereas Lisa Says Ga is like following trends to a certain extent. I mean, they have like they have a team of people who are developing the product and buying at this point. So it is not as intrinsically personal, just because it's not one person who's like, this is the vision that I have. Now I'm making it happen. It's like, and I've worked, I don't know, like when I worked at Nasty Gal, like there was this idea that we should try to, this whole team of people recreate whatever Sophia Amoroso's vision was, but like there was never any clear, like, what is that vision? We know heels with jeans, no red nail polish, sweaters with shorts, but like what was I don't know. It didn't feel like there's not, I don't know that person the way I almost feel like I know Wendy just from looking at everything she's ever made. It just feels like a human relationship, Talk about parasociality, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting how we've kind of like gone around of like kind of at the beginning and the middle of our conversation as like, oh, like the best thing you could do is like get outside of yourself and kind of like distance yourself from art, and then coming to like, but what's so great about Built by Wendy's clothing is how much, but it's almost like she's more of like an Ortessa situation where it's like her life experiences have informed her making something for the general public that is like high quality because it has her as the origin and the entry point, but it is just kind of like the diving board where she takes off to like develop something new.
I totally agree. And actually, I would really love to hear if from talking to her, Amanda, if you agree with this theory or not. So one of the things that surprised me most while talking to Wendy was I was like expecting to talk to a fashion designer, but really at her core, she is a businesswoman. She loves business. She loves building her business, running her business, defending it. And I actually think maybe that's the secret almost to her like artistic genius, is because her orientation on business and also like on literal like production and craft. She's also like a nerd about that. Like she loves like the factories and the cutting and the supplies, right? I think it frees her creative side to just like flow out of her, right? So she's not obsessing about like, what is my vision and like, who am I and what is my art? Like that just comes so naturally to her that it's almost like she could be making anything, not necessarily clothes, right? I don't think she really cares about clothes so much per se. She just wants to make and like connect with people who like what she makes. And I think maybe that keeps her from being too precious. Maybe that like gives her director access to whatever like well of inspiration is flowing up inside of her. Anyway, that's my theory. What do you think?
No, I think you're really onto something there too, because when we talked to her, I had a lot of anxiety that she was going to be a fashion person. And like, for better or worse, like generally that's not going to be a very interesting conversation or as interesting. And I think that like you said, what surprised me was like how passionate she was about understanding and being a part of how and where everything was made and how all the pieces fit together and just the day-to-day things you need to think about when you're running a business. Because I'll tell you, plenty of people go to fashion school and then they're like, oh, but like I don't want to like do math or worry about like shipping or anything like that. And she really enjoys the whole process of it all. And I really felt that like part of that is like that's just her personality and that sets her up for success. And she's very shrewd. I think that I was like, she's a shrewd business person, right? But I think some of that also stems from her having to sort of be a survivor and take care of herself and not coming out on the scene as like, I am a designer. I work in fashion with a capital F and I am like here to change the world. She was just kind of like, I make things I like. It pays my bills. I want to make sure the things I make are good. Like talking to her about her partnership with Wrangler, like very few designers would have done that collaboration. And this was in the pre-everyone collabs era, and it was striking because like Wrangler wasn't cool, and the stuff that she made was so nice.
Oh, incredibly cool. Like, yeah, when I went back and researched it, that was the stuff that I almost drooled over the most. Like I wanted everything in that collection.
Incredible. And she was very pragmatic about it. Like, they gave her money. She needed money. It was great. She was happy with how it all turned out. And I think honestly, it did way more for Wrangler than it ever did for her because it made them relevant made people, a whole generation of people be like, maybe Wrangler's cool, right? And they've never been able to recapture that. But the stuff she made was just so perfect. And for her, it was kind of like, well, I like need money for my business, but it ended up being like so iconic for so many of us. I don't know. A lot of people wouldn't have made that decision back then. They would have been like, ew.
Yeah, you're right. She was very pragmatic. Yeah. I feel like the other aspect of it was I feel like lots of truly creative people love the opportunity to have someone else pay for them to work with better materials and resources and supplies, right? So like, I remember that coming through in her interview where she was like, yeah, suddenly I was like talking to the like super high grade Japanese denim suppliers and like had access to, all these like skilled craftspeople. And like, of course, someone like her would be thrilled by that.
She was really awesome. I mean, I do think if she started a business today, she would kill it because I think she has something that like a lot of other designers just don't have. It's like I can't even put my finger on it, but I just like know it. But that's actually a really great transition into the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is like, Wendy was able to always kind of like follow her exact inspiration and do something with it for better or worse results sometimes. For you, I'm sure like you've read so much, you're inspired by music and theater and, all the art out there. I would assume that every day you get like 10,000 ideas for a zine, right? How do you actually decide on what you're going to make?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a bunch of lists of like the project banks of like many things that we want to do and work on. But I think that there's so many, I'm so lucky to have like Jane be in the
likewise
in my I think one of the great things about being in a partnership is that like there's things that are good for you to work on alone. There's things that you can work on together. So I think a lot of things with our projects is like what is best suited for like us too and like our joined sensibility. So thinking about the things that we are like most interested in right now, either because it like really speaks to like Jane and I also will throw and organize salons where people like talk about contemporary issues, and oftentimes we can like work through like there are certain things that we will be specifically obsessed with. So like what are we obsessed with right now, or do we need to like process our emotions about right now? What feels like scalable to design and research right now? Like there are a couple of ideas that are just like too ambitious that we have where it's kind of like, okay, sometimes this is going to be too much for our weary day job brains. So yeah, I think there's so many things that could be a zine, but I think so much of it is just about like what feels vital, exciting, and scalable, and something that we want to like put into the universe now.
Yep, I agree. And I think specifically it's like what things from the past capture our imagination. Because like so much of what we do is we go and do historical research for some reason. And is it okay if I talk about sod? I just want to give an example.
Yeah,
so like
course.
an example, and I don't really remember the exact story of this, was at some point Molly and I were talking about American history, and we're talking about sod houses, and just like hit upon the fact that she and I were both obsessed with sod houses, and that had stuck in our memories as like something that we learned about in American history. And that led us to generate this like whole world called Sod City that we want to write about in some form or another, where like it's like a community in the Great Plains in like late 19th century where people are living in sod houses. And I don't know why we both love this, but we do. So we just find those pockets of things and then focus on them.
I mean, I can't wait to read that because I have been, in one of the Little House on the Prairie books, they lived in a sod house.
Yes, it's like the third little. Yeah, I gave that to Jane for Christmas.
It's been living rent-free in my brain since then. Exactly. That's another book I read a million times. And I was like, what's it like to be in a sod house?
Yeah. Do bugs fall on you?
What does it smell like?
Yeah.
Right? I have so many. I can't wait to read this.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any last thoughts you want to add or anything you think we missed? Or
I wanted to put a call to action out of for the creators of the zines that influenced me most, of like if you're listening to this, just know, maybe reach out to me, but just know that you have influenced me greatly, which is Molly Tremble, author of How I Learned to Do That, Bloody Murder, the zine from the 90s. If you're listening, thank you. And call me. That's what I have to say. Or maybe Molly Tremble's just the main character, but I feel like that zine lives in my mind really run through. And like, thank you for kind of like really igniting my interest in zines and what zines can be.
Okay, can we do some predictions? Because I know Molly loves to predict trends. Yeah.
Oh, let me pull up something I feel like there are a bunch of concurrent threads of things that I always try to convince Jane to make zines about. And one of them is like a kind of like corporate Memphis, like made by a corporation trend forecasting booklet.
I want to do this. Why do I have to do it together?
I think you should. Yeah. I've had to go to so many of these presentations and read so many of these books. And I'm going to tell you, when you go to the mall and every store is selling the same thing, it's because they all have the same trend forecasting subscription.
Same WGN. Yeah.
So boring. When someone's like, well, did you look at the WGN trends? I'm like, fuck that.
So what should we predict? Should it be like zine trends?
It can be any trend. It can be like, I predict that people are going to start giving their cats perms. I don't know. That's not a trend I see coming.
God, I have so many predictions. Okay. I'll start with I'll just do 3. I think hyper seasonality. Just that phrase, just hyper seasonality. I think like people who start to develop skills in mind reading and ESP, and then really, really deluxe beds and bedscapes.
Ooh.
Those are my 3 trend forecasting. I would like to say that I predicted Catholicism.
Wow. Like just generally or?
Yeah, I invented it. Yeah. No, I just feel like a few years ago, I was like, there's going to be something with, and have you noticed if you like every A24 movie is about Catholicism?
It's true.
Now.
People are really digging it.
You're welcome, Amazon. Okay. Jane, what are your 3?
Oh God, I wasn't prepared to just have like 3 general trend predictions, but I'll do my best. Okay. I have at least one. Okay. I think that this particular Y2K hair trend will come back because it hasn't come back yet. But I've been watching a lot of 90s movies recently. And 2 key movies where you see it are, first of all, Juliette Lewis in Strange Days. And then oh shoot, what's the Lilu movie? The Fifth Element.
Which movie?
So Lilu and Juliette Lewis both have this hair. It's kind of like half curl, half dreadlock, which maybe is a little problematic and maybe it won't come back. But it's this kind of like corkscrew curl that's super messy and kind of matted, often with like hair that's dyed. That is just really wild and I don't know. I haven't seen it come back, but I think that it could. And then I will brag about the hair trend that I predicted that has come back, which is like curls, which for so many years have needed to be glossy and unwashed and like very articulated, now are becoming more like frizzy and unmanaged and dry.
That's on our trend forecasting sheet.
Frizzy hair.
Frizzy hair. You see that at zine fairs for sure.
Yeah. No, I believe the frizzy hair thing for sure. And personally prefer that too. I thought you were going to say scene hair was coming back, and I think it has to a certain extent, but I hate it.
Wait, does that mean like emo hair, or is that something different?
Yeah. So depending on where you lived, you might have called it emo hair. You might have called it scene.
Like Corey Kennedy hair.
No, I love Corey Kennedy hair. That's what I want my hair to do.
Yeah, I know you do. That's what I said. We've been starting. Okay, what are your predictions, Amanda?
I would really like to see like party photos, a la the.
Speaking of Corey,
I know. I've been thinking about this a lot lately.
The Cobra Snake.
Yes, exactly.
The Cobra Snake.
BT Dubs. We did a whole collab at Urban with the Cobra Snake where he did this little mini catalog of shoes. It was this whole thing where we were like trying to show that we also sold $500 shoes. And so we sent him all of these shoes. They all came back trashed. The catalog cost so much money, and all the pictures, because they were like party photos, were super blurry. You couldn't see the shoes. It didn't sell any shoes, but man, I still wish I had a copy of that. Anyway, a couple months ago, I bought a digital camera at the thrift store for $2, and I was just like taking party photos of my cats or whatever, and of like weird stuff around. And I was like, these are the most beautiful photos. Like, bring it back. And then I started going through my old photos of that era, and so I know that like young people don't go out the way people used to and get hammered and do regretful things and lose their shoes and whatnot. But like maybe they could merge like this idea of like photos not taken with your phone, taken with like an instant camera or like a digital camera, with whatever it is they do now for fun. Which might be staying in their apartments, which is chill. But I just think I went through a rabbit hole of looking at photos of that time, and I was like, yeah, I'm sick of iPhone photos. I think a lot of people are.
I love that.
A lot of my Gen Z coworkers have like Olympus, like
dude, they're really. It's like it looks completely different. I will tell you that like there was a period of time where I always had. Because it was a flip phone period. I had my flip phone in my bag, which sometimes I would take pictures with, not very often, because who are you going to send them to? And I always had a point and shoot everywhere I went. And when iPhones moved in and I started taking pictures with that, I was like, yeah, they look different, but I guess these are better. And now I look back and I'm like, actually, like the camera photos are better.
Everyone looks so nice because you're just completely washed out. You only see the outlines. Yeah. It's like so much contrast. Yeah, no, I love this idea. I think people can totally take party photos at home, like you did of your cats. Like I did that as a high schooler. Like we wanted party photos, but we like didn't really party at that scale. So my friends and I would just take pictures of each other, like in our bedrooms or whatever at slumber parties like that.
Yeah, my roommate Janelle and I we were like seriously like in our early 30s, and we were doing photo shoots in our apartment, like highly staged with like outfits and our like point and shoot cameras, and Bring it back, guys. We didn't make any money off of that. No, who cares? It was so fun. It was the best way to spend a day.
It's not about that.
Then we went back to the next day. Like, she was a designer at Anthro, and I would go sit at my desk at Urban Outfitters. Like, we were adults with careers, and we were at home, like, taking like crazy photos, and it was really fun. So, I don't know. Bring it back, guys.
Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah, cool. Well, it was so much fun to hang out today, and I wish I could talk to you for like 4 more hours, and I feel like I could.
Yeah, this was fantastic. Thank you.
This was amazing.
Please say hi if you're ever in the Bay Area.
I will. Most of my clients are in the Bay Area, actually, so I'm hoping to come out there in the coming months, and I'll let you know.
Awesome. Yeah.
Say hi.
Yeah, and one more plug for our website, contentqueenzine.com, where you can get zines representing many time periods, the 1700s, the 1960s, the 1990s, Y2K, and even more.
There are not enough zines representing the 1700s. So everyone, go now to contentqueenzine.com.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to Jane and Molly for spending some time with me. It was, I don't know, I had such a good time, and I can't wait to hang out with them IRL, hopefully this fall. I know we said this like 1,000 times in the episode, but please check out their zines, buy them, read them 50 times, share them with your friends. You can find them at contentqueenzine.com. I, for one, am eagerly awaiting this Sod House zine, and you know you are too. You know it. You want to know what it's like to live in a sod house. We all do. Well, that's all. That's all for this episode, because 1, I need to eat some dinner, and 2, the cows who live across the road, Coco and Brownie, they're getting real mooey right now because, well, it's like a whole long story, but basically the field that they live next to is being turned into hay. The hay is being harvested, so they can't go out there, and that's usually where they graze all day. And Coco, he gets really emotional when he can't go out in his pasture, and then he moves, and then that riles up Brownie, and then they're both moving. Thank you for listening to this update about the cows in my neighborhood. Also, I want to go read a book in bed with Brenda. So thank you for listening to another episode of Clothes Horse, written, researched, hosted, edited, cow stories, all the things by me, Amanda Lee McCarty. If you liked what you heard, please leave a rating, a review, subscribe, tell your friends. Let's get more people to listen to Clothes Horse. If you'd like to support my work financially, there are many ways you can do that. You can find that all in the show notes and in my bio on basically every social media platform where I go by as Clothes Horse Podcast. But I will tell you this, I am no longer posting on TikTok as of a couple weeks ago. I'll tell you more about that in the future. But basically, I was just like, what a profound waste of my time. And so many bad vibes over there. Lastly, but of course, never leastly, thank you to our one and only birthday boy. He's a Gemini, Mr. Dustin Travis White, for our music and audio support. Don't forget to get your tickets for the event in Philly, and I will talk to you all next week. Bye!